Pigs. Seriously, guys. Pigs. You're listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, episode 158. Coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed, high atop the Edwards Plateau. And it's been bright and sunny and hot.
Yes, sir.
We're in the depths of the Texas heat, but also very near my birthday. Will be this weekend, right. August 1st. I will be 42. I will have all the answers
to life, the universe, and everything
for the next year. Everything I say will be correct.
We're going to build a pyramid of beer cans.
Is that the plan? For
That's
the
my
party?
plan.
All right. We are joined by the Watcher for the first time in
many moons.
He is here for the first segment. Watcher, what's up, buddy? How you doing? What's going on in Watcher world?
May the light shine upon your pyramid of Coors.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So that's just what I need. Russ thinking that we're all going to accept that he's right about everything for a whole year.
It is written in the stars, my friend, which you should be able to see clearly from up there in space. I heard your pod bay doors collapsed. Isn't that what happened?
Yeah, I was in the shuttle bay, and now there's, strangely enough, potentially mold there, but that can't grow in space unless you wipe it off a window. But, you know.
Yeah. Space mold. Growing in the shuttle bay. That's terrible. Yep.
Price you pay in space.
That's right. Well, speaking of space, does this thing even... It's not even on.
No.
Hold on. We got this, people. All right, space weather news. Get this timer going again. From spaceweather.com, new cycle sunspot activity. Solar cycle 25 is gaining strength. Today, there are two new cycle sunspots on the solar disk, AR2767 and AR2768. Both have magnetic polarities that identify them as members of solar cycle 25. Neither appears to pose a threat for strong solar flares, though, so the quiet of solar minimum continues. Also, farewell Comet Neowise.
No.
The comet has faded dramatically since its close approach to Earth on July 23rd, dimming more than tenfold. It is no longer visible to the naked eye and won't swing around the sun again for another 6,800 years. To say farewell, Dennis of Borrego Springs, California, created this montage of the comet gliding across the evening sky. Yeah, and there's a great picture here. If you go to spaceweather.com, you can see it, of the comet appearing on different days and how you can see how it fades and rises pretty fast.
An old woman did that?
Dennis.
A man.
I think so. I'm not sure. I didn't bother to ask.
Man, sorry.
I got it eventually. I hope everyone got to see Comet Neowise during its recent visit, says Dennis. It became bright enough to see easily with the unaided eye from dark rural locations, but now, unfortunately, it has faded into the realm of large binoculars and telescopes. I photographed it each night from July 18th to 27th. And in this sequence, you can see the comet changing its size and brightness as it first approaches Earth and then recedes back into the depths of our solar system, not to return to our neighborhood for nearly 68 centuries. Despite its fade, Neowise remains a good target for photographers with telescopes and/or sensitive digital cameras. For more parting shots, many of them wonderful, you can browse the Neowise photo gallery on spaceweather.com. Current conditions. Solar wind speed is 348.3 kilometers per second, and the density is 6.7 protons per cubic centimeter. We have 22 sunspots currently. That's the current number. And our spotless days percentage for this year is going down. We're now down to 73% from 75 we were at before. Total of 153 days. Obviously, we are in a current 0 stretch of spotless days because we have 22 of them. And the total neutron count is still high at 9.3% above the space age average.
But is it dropping down? I mean...
Yes, so in the last 48 hours, it has gone down 0.5%.
Okay.
And
got to get those neutrons down,
that's right,
folks.
Yeah, that's right. And so the space age maximum was 11.7% above the average of all counts. So we're down to 9.3. We were higher than that before. So, yeah. And that's because the fewer
Solar
sunspots, the more cosmic rays get in to, to the solar system. So
Cool.
That's the space weather news for the week, folks.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Back to you, Kyle.
Well, let's do the listener communications, and I'll do my story at the end.
Okay. I also have a story.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, that's a good idea. Let me first do, since I've got this open, we got a couple of reviews. This one is titled Excellent and Intriguing. Says, these guys go deep. They are at the forefront of new thinking about old subjects. That's really cool.
Hey, that's cool. Thank you.
Never boring and with a big scoop of humor thrown in. This is one of my go-to listens while I work. From Andrew in New Zealand. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, buddy.
Also, this one's called Well, maybe I shouldn't read that. Anyway, it says, been listening to the Snake Bros religiously since finding the Randall Carlson podcast. I love how you guys deliver information. Such awesome dudes. Keep on doing your thing. Such fascinating topics. From Kent in England, Snake Bros! Yeah, nice title, buddy. I'm almost read it on the show. I'm glad I didn't do that. We got a family environment here. All right.
Thank you, buddy.
English guys. Man. Okay. Listener communications. All right. This one is from Eric. He is also in the Discord now. I've seen him in there a couple times. So he says, hey there, Snake Bros. I have been enjoying, as always, your latest episodes on evolution and genetics, and while getting in some video game time this morning, I was re-listening to your Earth in Upheaval series, more specifically episode 138. All three of you get into a mini discussion on evolution and genetics about halfway through the episode, and it sparked some thoughts that I would like to share. 1. Evolution sounds like a completely shitty system in order for a species to survive if it takes millions of years. Now, I understand the standard model leaves no room for major catastrophes, but say there is a dramatic shift in the environment in North America where all species here are now struggling for survival. Food is now really scarce, so in order to survive, there needs to be a dramatic shift within the species to survive, right? Well, if that is taking millions of years, then how the hell does any one of those species survive? To me, the time periods don't add up, unless we have it wrong and maybe it doesn't take millions of years. 2. What we see as evolution is recessed genes becoming dominant when the environment calls on it. The Watcher gave me this idea while he was talking about recessive genes. I have no idea if this is even a thing, but it made sense in my head, and I would like to know if it makes sense in yours. Thinking about your megalodon teeth where Skirps say, well, this is clear evidence of evolution, I had the idea that, say, megalodon started out with normal flat teeth as the dominant gene. The megalodon's main prey, which for example's sake is just a large whale, has the dominant gene of normal whale skin. As time goes on, the megalodon is having good success in their hunts, and in combination with other natural elements, the whale population is decreasing, not to a dangerous extent, but decreasing nonetheless. Well, the whale has a recessive gene that, let's say, gives it harder skin. And through some sort of switch in the genetics of the whale, the hard skin becomes dominant and starts being passed down for the betterment of survival. Time passes, and now Megalodon is he's calling him Meg. Meg is having a hard time catching the whales due to their sweet new skin, and that in turn may start having negative effects on the Meg population. So in turn, the serrated tooth gene starts becoming more dominant in order for the population to stabilize. Like your bedroom to bathroom analogy, we cannot suddenly start growing stuff that is not already within our foundations. But we do have genes that help species adapt to their environment, and not necessarily just for survival, but also a balancing act, as I tried to type out above. Or could it be those serrated teeth are just from a subspecies of Megalodon or a different species altogether and we've just lumped it in as being the same? I have no idea, as I am completely ignorant to all of this. but I hope this makes sense to you, snakes. Keep up the great work on the podcast. I have been thoroughly enjoying Discord as well. Interacting with not only you two, but the Snake Force in whole has been an awesome experience. Eric. P.S. Russ, thank you for the quick work on those snake evolution shirts. Ordered 2 yesterday for my daughter and I. Snakes!
Yeah, man. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, those are all good points, and I think I was trying to make the whole dominant recessive point. I think the Watchers tried to make that point several times. Kyle has made it. That, some of these adaptations we see are maybe just recessive genes expressing more, or switches being turned on and off in the genetic code. And of course, I don't know what I'm talking about when I say that. I don't really know what that even means, but you get the idea. But yeah, I loved the Meg story with the whales. That was great.
Meg. Yeah, and that is, based on just the definition of the word, that's a form of evolution.
Yeah, that's right.
Regardless.
Right. Absolutely. Changes due to environmental things.
Right. Environmental pressures or...
It just isn't the kind of... it's just not the accidental mutation thing but from neo-Darwinism or whatever.
Yeah.
Synthesis theory. Okay. This is a Patreon message from Eric. He says, "Hey, Russ and Kyle. After listening to your most recent podcast, I remembered that I signed up as a Patreon member when I was drunk." This is true. I saw the Patreon sign up, Eric. You signed up for I think you signed up for like $36 a month. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, buddy.
And he was one of the highest tiers, but yeah, he totally wasted. He says, "I don't have the confidence that Levi the mechanic has, so I decided I was too drunk to write a coherent message thanking you for all the incredible 33% mind-expanding content that makes me want to send you straight to pyramids, and I want to go too. You guys are the best. Keep up the laughter and open discussion about everything. The last 2 episodes about hybridization have been blowing my mind and leading me to having some interesting conversations and thinking about everything in a new light. Thanks again, Snakes!" Yeah.
Awesome, man.
That's exactly what we do this show for, man. So that's great. And he is in the Discord, and his name in there is Eric the Norseman. So get in there and tell him what's up. And tell him thanks for the support. Another short Patreon message here. This is from Andrew, who I read his review.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just says, "Glad to lend some support. All the best." Thank you, buddy. Really appreciate that.
Much appreciated.
Yeah. Okay. This one is from Brandon. He says, "Don't dox me, yo," so I'm just doing the first name. It's called Evolution and Consciousness Thoughts. "Hey, snakes. I had some thoughts today while listening out on a walk, and I thought I'd share. Talking about irreducible complexity is that it's a lot like Zeno's paradox. It's sort of a fallacy. You can call anything irreducibly complex because there's always a sort of a leap to get there. Even between parent and child, as evolution must progress, there is a gulf between them that has to be leapt. And ultimately, the insurmountable gulf between chaos and order is impossible. And yet here we are. Exquisite order at every magnitude in an entropic universe. Weird. This, for me, is where consciousness comes in, and magic, and will. The moment of the leap. Maybe that's where consciousness can choose. It's almost impossible, I won't rule it out, to mentally flip a die while it sits on the table, but maybe while it's tumbling after the roll, a nudge can be given. Maybe that's how the right gene seems to show up in random mutations at cell division, because there's a sort of will or need to evolve. Necessity breeds invention. And this is the moment of inspiration in spirit. Speaking from my own experience, I often feel like I'm sort of blundering through life, but with a goal or a series of goals in mind. And even though I can't plan every moment or every chance, things sort of work out. And we'll accidentally meet halfway at least. I mean, we know mutations should be disastrous usually, and evolution should be slow, waiting on the rare good one. Yet the world can change quickly and life has to keep up. And since I see consciousness and life as absolutely fundamental to the universe, this has to be factored in. Some innerness to everything. Standard story science and leaving consciousness out is perpetually confused in this and many areas and fields. Yeah, the other thing which you guys got to at the end of that had me almost pumping my fist was how all of these theories and species and categories and even words are all disappointingly just models. Like the damn science news stories. It's all trying to make particles of waves to chop the universe into a bunch of little pieces. But it's all one thing, and the models are never going to be more than working models. The uncertainty principle, rather than a flaw, is a backdoor out of the prison of the illusions of models that science found in its own course, which is why I love science as a method, not a dogma. They baked doubt in and left a way out of the labyrinth of mental stagnation. Anyways, great series of shows lately, and as always, I appreciate the dialogue, and coming from me, a non-Christian, that email from the preacher read on episode 157 talking about light gave me goosebumps. Very beautiful. I'm loving hearing everyone's thoughts on all of the topics you guys are having, and also inspiring great conversations and thoughts, and I appreciate it so much. I don't always agree with everything, but that's the journey. For myself, at least, it's good to push the boundaries and challenge my own assumptions. We serpents grow by shedding our old skins constantly, right? So keep it up, slithery, y'all. Snacks! From
Shedskin Bale.
Shedskin Bale.
Yes. Awesome, man.
Best way to get rid of an old theory. Shedskin Bale.
That's great.
Yeah, all that was great. I agree that there's with the consciousness stuff. It is interesting how that could be playing a part. That there is an imperative somewhere in all of this stuff. And when we dive more into I've got more of the hybridization stuff. There's just some of the stuff this guy's pointing out that happens during fertilization and conception. I'm just like, how does this work? How does it just work like that? How is this even possible? So yes, I think that the consciousness stuff is very interesting. And also good points on the, mutations should be disastrous and evolution should be slow, but life has to keep up and stuff changes fast sometimes. Yeah. Both of you, Eric and Brandon, made that point.
Yeah, I think the main, I don't know, I guess my approach to this whole idea is that we don't have the complete story. It's not to say that one idea is completely right or wrong, but they're all interesting ideas, but still no perfect, complete story.
That's right.
And that's why it's fun to explore it,
Yes. It's only a model. The Monty Python jokes are strong in the first segment.
Right.
All right. This one is a comment on episode number 8. That's a long time ago. Episode is called The Ordinary Extraordinary, Lucid Dreaming. So it says, though I also haven't dreamt about a phone, I have dreamt of reading chats in it. I could see the screen and even read the messages, but I couldn't use a keyboard to respond. I do wonder how many people are able to read or write in their dreams. I managed to read sentences in several of mine and even write my name, but the letters weren't at all the right ones. LOL. Thank you guys for venturing on recording and inviting us to listen. I find a lot in common in your work and in the snake pit, so don't stop. So yeah, I guess that must be the episode where I was flipping out about not dreaming about phones. Yeah. And I just wanted to this reminded me, I've been meaning to say this for a while now. I think I told you about it weeks ago.
I was gonna ask.
That I actually had a dream where I busted out my phone in the dream, and it was weird because in the dream I was concerned. The dream was already strange because in the dream I was waking up, right? I was getting out of bed and I was thinking, holy shit, I overslept. And I was freaking out, and I was like, what time is it? I'm looking around, and I'm like, oh, I need my phone to check the time. And I pull out this black box, which is my phone, but none of the buttons work. The screen wouldn't come on, or I hit the button, and the screen would do this weird flickery. It never came on and worked. But when I woke up, I was like, holy shit! My phone was in the dream!
You did it.
Yeah.
You made it to the next step of higher consciousness.
Yeah, so I guess I wonder if that's there was something about checking the time, which is something you hardly ever do in a dream. But when that came up in the dream, I thought of the phone because that's how I check time now. I don't look at a clock. I don't have any clocks in the house, in the tower, really.
Yeah, so now you need to, every time you look at your phone, you need to tell yourself, I'm dreaming. right?
Great idea.
So
the next 10 years from now, the next time I pull out the phone, I'll be like, oh,
lucid dreaming.
Lucid dreaming. Totally succeeded.
Free reign. Go find all the pyramids.
But that's interesting too. The question of can you read in a dream? I was thinking about that too. I was like, did the phone not come on because my brain knew that I wouldn't be able to? None of the symbols on it would make sense anyway. You know? So he's asking, do people read in their dreams? He says he tried to write his name and none of the characters were correct, but he thought he was doing it right. You know?
It was Babel.
Yeah,
it was the original language.
This is an unknown, so I don't know who wrote this, but yeah. Great comment there from a very old episode 8. Gone back to the very beginning of the back catalog there. All right, this one's called this person's Discord name is Jim Bag, but the email title is I'm a Johnson. Which is a great email. I'm a Johnson. Okay. For Russ's birthday, it says, just wanted to wish you a happy birthday and thank you and your brother for such a great podcast. Everything from the diverse content to the music to the production quality, etc., has all contributed to making it my favorite podcast, surpassing even the Joe Rogan Experience. Wow, man. Thanks, you. Buddy. I have purchased and read several books recommended by you, including Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages, The Giza Power Plant, and I am currently reading the second of Zachariah Sitchin's books. I have heard you refer to the SitchinIsWrong.com website many times, and it got me thinking that you should publish a pro-Sitchin website for fun and promotion of his work. It would, of course, have to be called SitchinIsBitchin.com. I registered the domain name yesterday, and it is yours for the taking if you could figure out how I can transfer ownership to you. Anyway, have a fantastic year, and keep on slithering, Jim Bag. Sitchin is bitchin'.
Yes.
So that's my birthday present.
Man.
He's going to give us SitchinIsBitchin.com for my birthday.
That's great.
I love the Snake Force. You guys are hilarious. Okay. Last one for this week. This one is from John. He calls it Darwin's Doubt and Panspermia. He says, love you guys on Cosmographia. I have been following Randall since his first visit on Joe Rogan's podcast, and have watched everything he has done since then, and I have, as well as becoming a supporter on Patreon. I never fail to learn something with every episode. Naturally, the more I learn, the more questions I have. Your podcast with Dr. Chandra Wickramasinghe caused something in my brain to click. I have been reading Dr. Stephen Mayer's books, Signature in the Cell, and more recent, Darwin's Doubt. Intelligent design seems to be proving more plausible the more we learn about the mathematic probability of random selection. The Cambrian explosion is a good example of something happening in a time frame that precludes just random selection. Then I listened to Dr. Chandra Wickramasinghe on your podcast, and all of a sudden it clicked. Panspermia, the rotation of the Earth through the galaxy, bacteria and viruses surviving in space, etc. So while it's not exactly intelligent design, it does go away toward ordering things in my decidedly unscientific mind. It would be great to hear you discuss the two theories with both of these gentlemen, but I won't hold my breath. Anyway, thanks for keeping me entertained. I wish I could afford to do the upcoming tour with you and Randall and company, but I'll just have to live it vicariously through the podcast. Stay safe, John.
Awesome. Yeah. I don't know if we can get Randall to change subjects. That's not going to happen.
Right.
It's really hard. But he's got a master plan.
Yeah, no, I think what he's saying is he wants us to get Wickramasinghe and Stephen Mayer on the podcast.
Oh, I thought he was saying have the discussion with Randall and Wickramasinghe.
Well, maybe.
But
Randall does want to get Wickramasinghe on the show.
Yeah.
So that will happen at some point. Yeah, but yeah, I was thinking since he emailed this to us that he was hoping that we could get these guys on our show. And
yeah, well, yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. All right. That's the email count for this week. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you all so much. We love you guys.
Yes. Love the emails.
All right, I got a... Well, do you want to do your story first?
No, go ahead.
UFOs. Do you have a story about UFOs?
I do happen to have a story about UFOs. UFOs.
I think you should do it.
All right. This is from popularmechanics.com. And people in the Discord have been asking us if we're going to be talking about this topic. And Kyle and I have been pointing out to each other that we need to talk about this topic. So here we go. At least for this story, I want to do more extensive dives into this subject because this things are changing very quickly right now. So we will be doing that soon. But in the meantime, here's this story. The title is Pentagon has off-world vehicles not made on this Earth. That's in quotation marks. So bombshell, the government's once clandestine UFO program will reveal findings on unexplained materials and crashes. The Pentagon's on and off again once covert UFO program is decidedly back on and will soon reveal some of its findings to the public. An astrophysicist who consulted on the UFO program confirms the government possesses materials from, quote, off-world vehicles not made on this Earth, unquote.
Crap.
So, for years, the U.S. government has repeatedly changed its tune regarding its official involvement with UFO research. As recently as February, a Pentagon spokesperson told Popular Mechanics that while a government program did investigate unmanned aerial vehicles and other unexplained aerial phenomena for some time last decade, funding dried up in 2012. But when Popular Mechanics thoroughly investigated this covert program, multiple sources said it is still ongoing to this day. Now, a new report in the New York Times confirms those accounts. Oh, and I also want to say, before I dive farther into this, there are the nature of the story, and because it's happening right now, there are names of current political people in here, which you never hear on this show. But for the sake of the story, I'm going to be reading it, so I'm just letting everybody know. Normally I wouldn't do that, but that's just how this story goes. So, but yeah, as soon as I see these names in the stories, I'm like, nope, don't want to talk about that guy.
Yeah.
All right. The government's UFO unit currently resides in the Office of Naval Intelligence, which I find very interesting. So, Air Force was who was messing with it before, but now it's moved to the Navy, where it, quote, deals with classified matters, unquote, per the report, even though the unit itself isn't classified. The Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force is meant to, quote, standardize collection and reporting, unquote, on sightings of UAVs and publicly divulge at least some of its findings twice a year, according to the New York Times. In a June Senate committee report, the Senate authorized appropriations for fiscal year 2021 for this task force, supporting its efforts to reveal any links that unidentified aerial phenomena have to adversarial foreign governments and the threat they pose to U.S. military assets and installations. So, from the report, quote, the committee remains concerned that there is no unified, comprehensive process within the federal government for collecting and analyzing intelligence on unidentified aerial phenomena, despite the potential threat. The committee understands that the relevant intelligence may be sensitive. Nevertheless, the committee finds that the information sharing and coordination across the intelligence community has been inconsistent, and this issue has lacked attention from senior leaders. Therefore, the committee directs the DNI, in consultation with the Secretary of Defense and the heads of such other agencies as the Director and Secretary, jointly consider relevant to submit a report within 180 days of the date of enactment of this act to the Congressional Intelligence and Armed Services Committees on Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, also known as anomalous aerial vehicles, including observed airborne objects that have not been identified. So going on with the article here, Senator Marco Rubio, who chairs the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, told a CBS affiliate in Florida that he's most interested to learn from the task force who is responsible for unidentified aircraft spotted over American military bases. Rubio says he hopes the Chinese or Russians or some other adversary hasn't made some sort of technological leap that allows them to conduct this sort of activity. That, to me, Rubio said, is a national security risk and one we should be looking into. While such UAVs may very well come from foreign adversaries, the other possibility, of course, is that we can't pinpoint their origins from anywhere on this planet. And that is where the New York Times report gets really interesting. Harry Reid, the former Nevada senator who was instrumental in funding the original UFO program, told The Times he believes that crashes of objects of unknown origin may have occurred and that retrieved materials should be studied. So from the article, quote, after looking into this, I came to the conclusion that there were reports, some were substantive, some not substantive, that there were actual materials that the government and the private sector had in their possession, unquote. An earlier version of the Times article said Reed believed crashes from other worlds had indeed occurred, and that retrieved materials had been studied secretly for decades, often by aerospace companies under government contracts. The Times has corrected Reed's account, and Reed has clarified his statements. The clarification basically, he says, I have no knowledge that this is actually happening, but this is what I think. Okay. So, astrophysicist Eric Davis, who consulted with the Pentagon's original UFO program and now works for the defense contractor Aerospace Corporation, told The Times that after he examined certain materials, he came to the conclusion that, quote, we couldn't make them ourselves, unquote. In fact, Davis briefed a Department of Defense agency as recently as March about retrieving materials from off-world vehicles not made on this planet. As we have said previously, the Department of Defense and all of the military departments take any incursions by unauthorized aircraft into our training ranges or designated airspace very seriously, and we examine each report, a Pentagon spokesperson told Popular Mechanics in a statement. This includes examinations of incursions that are initially reported as unidentified aerial phenomena when the observer cannot immediately identify what he or she is observing. Thorough examinations of any incursions into our training ranges or designated airspace often involves assessments from across the department and, as appropriate, consultation with other U.S. government departments and agencies. The spokesperson continues, the safety of our personnel and the security of our operations is of paramount concern. To protect our people and maintain operations security, which includes not providing information that may be useful to our adversaries, the Department of Defense does not discuss publicly the details of either the observations or the examination of reported incursions into our training ranges or designated airspaces, including those incursions initially designated as unidentified. So, in regards to the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force mentioned in the Times, the spokesperson confirms the Department of Defense is creating a task force to gain knowledge and insight into the nature and origins of UAPs, as well as their operations, capabilities, performance, and or signatures. The mission will be to detect, analyze, catalog, consolidate, and exploit non-traditional aerospace vehicles or UAPs posing an operational threat to the U.S. national security and avoid strategic surprise. The Times report and the anticipated public disclosure of findings from Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force are the latest and encouraging recent developments surrounding UFO research. Back in April, the U.S. Navy officially published 3 videos that show unidentified aerial vehicles are genuine, several years after the notorious clips first leaked online and properly ushered in a UFO renaissance. In 2019, the Navy confirmed the 3 videos taken by Navy pilots indeed do show unexplained aerial phenomena, but the service also said the footage should have never been released to the public in the first place. Then in April, the service dropped the clips on its Freedom of Information Act page, a repository for documents released under the federal law that allows for the full or partial disclosure of U.S. government information to the public. The clips were first released in 2017 and 2018 by the New York Times and the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, which is a UFO research group from former Blink-182 member Tom DeLonge. After a thorough review, a Pentagon spokesperson told Popular Mechanics in April, the department has determined that the authorized release of these unclassified videos does not reveal any sensitive capabilities or systems and does not impinge on any subsequent investigations of military airspace incursions by unidentified aerial phenomena. So, there's more here. It's pretty long, but I think the point to me is, you know, this is, I don't know if I would say this is disclosure in the way that people always thought disclosure would happen, but this is a kind of disclosure. What's actually happening now is a fully official and widely propagated through media, through big media like the New York Times, right?
Yeah.
Popular Mechanics. that these people aren't laughing and snickering about UFOs anymore.
Yeah.
Okay? That's going to change a lot of stuff because the people we really want looking at this stuff are not the media and not the government, but scientists. We want actual scientists who are interested in this to be able to, like, let's investigate this and think about it without getting our careers destroyed.
Yes.
So I think
That sort of lends legitimacy to the research aspect of it, right?
Right. They won't be kooks anymore. It'll be something that you can be like, look, it's in the New York Times. It's like the Navy, whatever. Now it's legit. You can go and study it without, there's probably still somewhat of a stigma.
Yeah.
But I think that the most interesting thing that's going to happen from this, at least as far as I can tell right now, obviously really interesting things could happen if they have actual pieces of unidentified material from crafts that we don't know where they came from and may not come from this Earth. That's really interesting. But just on the human part, scientists now actually thinking about this in a big way and doing regular science on it, and thinking about it. Like, I've already heard there have been some repercussions of this just from those Navy videos coming out, where scientists are looking at those videos and being like, okay, what does this mean? If we look at the capabilities that seem to be displayed by these objects in this video, what can we now think about alien life and what they might be doing? That's what I'm talking about. That's what I want to happen, is real thinkers who are good at thinking about this kind of stuff, cosmologists and everything, or whoever wants to do it can now start thinking about it and start talking about it with each other and come up with stuff that nobody has thought of yet because this subject has had so much stigma.
Yeah.
So that's my hot take.
Yeah. Yeah. Your point about like the videos and the stuff that's happening with the aircraft, they're saying, okay, this is possible.
Yeah, that's the other thing. They're like, this is possible. Yeah, exactly. Now, how can I build one of those?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think a big part of it is they don't have to admit that fairies and leprechauns are real by acknowledging it.
Yes.
That's right. It doesn't.
And unicorns.
They
don't have to.
And unicorns.
It won't get mixed in with Bigfoot and whatever else people think that doesn't exist. Right? Exactly. You're exactly right. Oh, yeah. You believe in UFOs and unicorns and aliens or whatever. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
You can take two of those out of there now.
All right. Last story of the segment. This is also from popularmechanics.com.
Going long.
And this one came from GMA.
Oh, good.
So, yeah.
Fantastic.
He sent me this morning.
People have been asking, when's the next GMA episode coming out?
Yeah.
I told them we got one in the works.
You better get ready, buddy.
That's right.
Scientists goofed and accidentally created a new kind of fish. In an effort to save the Russian sturgeon, scientists accidentally created a fish hybrid while breeding the endangered species in captivity. A new paper in Genes describes how two different types of fish, sturgeon and paddlefish, bred to create hybrid offspring. The creation of these hybrid sturtlefish was accidental and occurred in a lab in Hungary while researchers were trying to breed Russian sturgeons in captivity because the fish is endangered, with some sturgeon species being critically endangered. In a wild turn of events, a new kind of fish has been born in a lab entirely by accident. The sturtlefish is a hybrid between Russian sturgeon and an American paddlefish and came into existence by accident. Both fish, which are considered endangered, managed to breed while in captivity at the Hungarian lab. The sneaky fish ended up creating hundreds of hybrid offspring, but some have since died. According to the researchers, survival in all hybrid family groups ranged from 62% to 74% 30 days after hatching. This also marks the first time that successful hybridization has occurred between both species. Scientists think. I put that in there.
Yeah.
This new sturtlefish came into existence when the research team tried to breed more Russian sturgeons via gynogenesis, which is a type of asexual reproduction in which sperm is necessary but leaves no traces of its DNA behind. As a result, the offspring ends up with 100% maternal DNA and none from the paternal contributor.
Watch her put a picture of a paddlefish up there.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Holy crap.
This is where the American paddlefish comes in, as the team used sperm from this fish to start the gynogenesis in the sturgeon. What researchers were not expecting was that the sperm and egg would fuse, creating a new hybrid fish. Still, the hybrids aren't all the same. Some are close to an even 50-50 genetic split between their two parents.
Yeah.
But others appear more sturgeon-like.
Yep.
While others have stronger paddlefish traits.
Yep.
According to Live Science, all of the hybrids are carnivorous, just like the sturgeon, who feeds on mollusks and crustaceans. This is unlike the paternal paddlefish, who feed on various zooplankton.
There's a sturgeon.
Yeah. That guy is really excited.
Woo! What? Oh, they feed on zooplankton? Is that what you said?
Yeah, the paddlefish.
Okay. All right.
So the Times reports that approximately 100 sturtlefish remain alive today. The team behind the accidental hybridization says that they have no plans for creating more sturtlefish in the future. A short-lived life for a species that was never meant to be.
False.
So, yeah.
Gonna take over the world.
So I wish they would have put, of course, they're not intending to experiment with it, but come on, see if it can breed,
Right, yeah.
Like that would be interesting.
They can't let it go extinct. That's wrong. They've got to keep it alive forever and put it on an endangered species list.
It's immediately endangered.
It's immediately endangered. There's only 100 of them.
Whoops, looks like it's endangered.
At least they think there's only 100 of them.
Yeah.
They're probably, one of them's from Russia, the other one's from the U.S. So.
Yeah. Man.
That what they should do is put them all up in a big plane and fly somewhere and just drop them.
During rainstorms?
Yeah.
Blame it on water spouts. It's a great idea.
Some type of fish we've never seen before.
All right. We're going to take a break and come back and dive into this hybridization and stabilization theory.
Snakes!
Stay with us.
And we are back, Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Almost always wrong about everything.
That's right.
Not always, but most of the time.
Yeah. Standards. Those are our standards.
That's right.
Not to be always wrong, just almost always.
And with that, we shall dive back into the hybridization.
Yeah, so after last week of the last couple of weeks trying to read directly from the website, what I did was I went to the website and basically read through everything and kind of did what I do with books. I selected pieces that I wanted to read and basically made my own file. So I'm going to be reading from that, where I've taken excerpts from parts of the website that I wanted to read, and it should be fairly coherent. I removed a lot of it. He's got tons of examples, and the examples are full of quotes from scientists and papers, and that's what it gets tough to read. And then he's always throwing in, like a biologist or a geneticist should, he's always throwing in the binomial names of the animals, which I totally can't pronounce and have no idea how to say, so I took those out whenever I could.
Yeah. It's a bunny rabbit.
So there's a few more things here that I wanted to go through on species themselves, and then we're going to get into some of the other hybridization stuff. So let's go here. So
right.
he says...
Hold on.
Oh,
all right, let's go.
Crack it. Yep. He says, in a letter to Joseph Hooker, dated December 24th, 1856, Darwin wrote, I have just been comparing the definitions of species. It is really laughable to see what different ideas are prominent in various naturalists' minds when they speak of species. In some, resemblance is everything, and descent is of little weight. And in some, resemblance seems to go for nothing, and creation is the reigning idea. And in some, descent is the key, and in some, sterility is an unfailing test, and with others, it is not worth a farthing. It all comes, I believe, from trying to define the undefinable. And yet Darwin certainly doesn't avoid using this word in Origin of the Species. In fact, he uses it in almost every paragraph and even in the very title of the book. Nor does he express amusement therein when commenting on the variety of its definitions. Quote, "Nor shall I here discuss the various definitions which have been given of the term species. No one definition has as yet satisfied all naturalists, yet every naturalist knows vaguely what he means when he speaks of a species." Unquote. In point of fact, an examination of his own writings shows that he used at various times each of the various usual types of definitions himself. Locke asserted that men talk to one another and dispute in words whose meaning is not agreed between them, out of a mistake that the significations of common words are certainly established and the precise ideas they stand for are perfectly known. The signification of species had certainly not been established in Darwin's day. It has not yet been established even today, though a century and a half of thought intervenes. There is no common agreement on how it should be defined.
Signification?
Yeah, significations.
Okay.
And I think what he's basically saying, and we were talking about this in the last episode, like, the words are important. They need to be defined properly if we're going to be able to talk about this.
Yeah.
And have everybody have the same idea.
Yeah, that's a huge part of the scientific method. Is
Right. Getting the definitions of words
right.
very precise.
The lexicon.
And I guess a lot of this is trying to point out that they haven't been able to do that with this word.
Right.
And that some people use morphology, the shape or the appearance of the animal. Some people now we use genetics in some cases, but you can't really do that all the time either. Some people use whether they can interbreed with another, that's where they determine. And he's just saying that when you have all these naturalists, and this is across 2 centuries of doing this work, that a lot of those different ideas of what species are built into the tree of life that you see when you go, and it's also constantly changing today. We were reading some last week about how, their definitions of what is and isn't a species is changing based on what they think about hybridization.
Right.
So, the search for the undiscovered and undiscoverable essence of the term species has not ceased. There has been endless debate over the meaning of the word, but its use has continued, ubiquitous not only in biology but even in everyday conversation. Many naturalists can still be grimly serious when it comes to the issue of whether a given type of organism should be treated as a species. Different researchers use different criteria for making such decisions, just as they did in Darwin's day. These different interpretations of the word species, what Locke would have called the multiplicity of its significations, produce needless misapprehension in evolutionary discussion. For example, Bullock's oriole. This is another thing. I've tried to learn how to pronounce a lot of these animal names, and some of them I'm just going to mangle because I have no idea. I think oriole is correct, though. Bullock's oriole is often treated as a species. However, this bird interbreeds very extensively with the Baltimore oriole, which is also often treated as a species. Anyone who accepted a biological definition of species and saw that Bullock's oriole is treated as a species might suppose it had the traits specified by such a definition. Such is certainly not the case. These two birds produce huge numbers of natural hybrids that are partially fertile in both sexes. Conversely, there are many cases where populations treated as distinct races of the same species produce infertile or even absolutely sterile hybrids. For example, many populations treated as races of the house mouse fit this description. So they're treated
They're
as
different races, but they can't interbreed.
Right.
Yeah.
Same species, just different races of the same, like dogs, right? All these domestic dogs are different races, or we call them breeds.
Yeah.
But they're all basically the same species of dog, and they can all interbreed. But he's saying that populations treated as races of the house mouse can't interbreed, and yet they're all treated as the same species.
So, with all of this ambiguity as to what species meant, he decided to name his book The Origin of Species.
Yeah. I think that's what he was kind of pointing out in the beginning there. Yeah.
Yeah, just wow.
Yeah. So, during the rise of science in the 17th and 18th centuries, the pre-scientific belief that immutable species actually did exist seems to have gone largely unquestioned. Naturalists transferred the word species and the emphasis placed upon it from the scholastic tradition into a new intellectual setting. Their motives were different, but they still thought some natural populations should be treated as species and others should not. The issue was never whether species existed, but rather what they were and how they should be defined. A system of classification and a terminology created by the followers of Aristotle and Aquinas was taken up and extended by men of a different mind. They were empiricists, most of whom lacked all interest in peripatetic or Aristotelian philosophy. So the people who continued this idea of classification, which basically is based from Aristotle, were nothing like him and not philosophers. They were empiricists. But they continued this idea and never changed it. The idea that there are some, that you can actually go out into the natural world and put things in little boxes, like I was saying last week. So many modern biologists commit the same sort of error with regard to the word species that Locke said the scholastics did. The only difference is that where a 17th century biologist would speak of essences, a biologist now would speak of reproductive isolation. This is because many believe the essential characteristics of a species is captured in the definition of a species as groups of actually or potentially interbreeding natural populations which are reproductively isolated from other such groups. That's the most common definition. The mistake arises when they assume the typical population treated as a species is known to have this characteristic. In fact, the vast majority of all natural populations treated as species are so treated solely on the basis of the distinctive traits of specimens, and it isn't known whether they are reproductively isolated. So, in other words, you go out there, you obviously can't see them all. You get a few specimens. And then the assumption is that they're reproductively isolated when no one actually knows that, because you have to define the edges of a population and then what's happening at the edges, because that's where the hybridization occurs.
Right.
It is a mistake, then, to suppose that it is known that populations so treated have this property of being isolated, or even to suppose it is known that most do. In point of fact, although there is no data bearing on isolation for most populations so treated, many such populations are known to interbreed. Anyone who assumes, then, that the typical population treated as a species does not interbreed with other such populations is liable to great mistakes, as Locke put it. For, from that assumption, it is easy to go further and believe neo-Darwinism's claim that new types of organisms are typically produced by a gradual accumulation of favorable variant traits in isolation. So ensuing sections will argue that this claim is incorrect, and in doing so will attempt to show that the accepted conception of evolution is fundamentally at error. I think these are good points. Like, if you want to be able to put things in little boxes, the species and stuff like that, and your definition of species is that they're reproductively isolated, that they can't interbreed with other stuff around them that may not look the same as them. But you can't go out there and actually find out if that's really happening without doing a lot of work. So there's thousands and thousands and thousands of species where no one knows if they're reproductively isolated. They have done some work, and this guy specifically has done tons of work on birds. He wrote a whole book on bird hybridization. And he was constantly trying to point out, like, look how often all of these birds are breeding with each other at the edges of where they live. Mm-hmm. You know, so you've got an area, and we'll talk about this later, but there's a big area where there's a big bird population in this forest. And the edges of that bird population butts up against the edges of a different kind of bird population. And in that area, you find hybrids all the time. And the farther into one parent species you go, the hybrids become more like those parent because they've been backbreeding
Yeah.
in the same way in the other. So it's like there's this gradient effect.
Yeah. Not a fine line.
Right. Like Watcher was telling us, was it last week, about the cat? And they have the F1, F2, F3, F4, and it's about how many times the cat has been backbred into, like the hybrid version has been bred back with the parent, one of the parent species. That happens naturally all over the place.
So it's interesting to think about the idea of endangered species because they are the edges.
That's right.
Of their population, right? So it's like, how often are they creating hybrids with other, maybe vastly different ones? Or maybe those hybrids have existed for a long time and they're still there.
Yep.
But it appears that there's one type that's like, oh, this is endangered, but it's just blurring into the lines of these
That's
other.
Right.
You know what I mean?
He points that out too. That without, if you if you didn't know that you were looking at a hybrid, and you weren't really familiar with both parent species, you may not be aware.
You may not be aware. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, question for you guys.
Okay.
I've noticed this recently, and from like from when I was young, I only ever remembered seeing like yellow black wasps, right?
Okay.
Recently, within the last 2 years, I've seen red, I've seen black, I've seen dark blue, orange, like wasps flying around.
Ah, dark
singular wasps. Like I don't see, like like a dark blue.
Wow.
And
murder hornets.
Like I don't see tons of them. Dude, I did see a murder hornet. That was not cool. Thing was huge. But like I wonder if that plays into it, or at least a part into it. And I keep trying to take my brain away from the fact that the really strange anomalous DNA findings of Dr. Ketchum's study totally makes sense if you're dealing with hybridization.
That's right. I thought of that too, that there's
because the
hybridization evidence in there. Yeah.
The extra sex chromosome having 3 instead of 2 in some cases.
Yep.
All of it. It would even be completely novel DNA strands if it was hybridized, because you'd have the annealing of 2 different RNA strands to 1 rather than a transcription.
Yeah, you're right. That could explain a lot of quote unquote wild man sightings across the ages. Would be a hybrid of human and something. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Human and squanch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Yeti's like with a snowball and a human.
Yeah. The reader may recall the definition of hybrid. If 2 populations are consistently distinct with respect to 1 or more characters, and if a descendant of matings between those populations is discernibly mixed with respect to those characters, then that individual is a hybrid, and any process producing such individuals is hybridization. Hybrids produced by an initial cross between 2 parental types are known as F1 hybrids, or the F1 generation. Hybrids produced by matings among F1 hybrids are known as F2 hybrids, while those produced among F2 hybrids are F3 hybrids, and so forth. Back-cross hybrids are produced when hybrids mate with either parental type. When the resulting back-cross hybrids mate again with the same parental type, the result is the second back-cross generation, and so forth. Hybridization occurs in a broad range of organisms and plants and animals and fungi. Indeed, as we shall see, hybridization is a well-documented phenomenon even among bacteria.
All right. What about when a hybrid then hybridizes with something else?
Yes,
other than the parent
that's
species.
3-way and 4-way and 5. He talks about that too. Yeah.
Yes, this is what you were talking about with crazy jungle cats.
That's right.
That's right. Crazy jungle cowardice.
Okay, gametes. Is that the right gametes? I think is how you say that. Specialized cells functioning in sexual reproduction. Hybrid individuals of reduced fertility produce fewer gametes than pure individuals, and those that they do produce are more frequently defective than those of a non-hybrid individual. So he's talking about the eggs or the what?
Yeah, yeah, exactly that. The actual cells involved in recombinant reproduction, so sperm and egg,
Right, sperm and eggs
are gametes.
Gametes.
So, yeah, you had it right.
Okay, cool. In sexual organisms, a gamete produced by the male parent fuses with a gamete produced by the female parent to initiate formation of a new individual, and this event is called fertilization. Gametes are generally produced in abundance. Therefore, a hybrid may be extremely sterile in comparison with its parents, but still produce huge numbers of viable gametes. The sheer quantity in which gametes are produced explains why many hybrids are partially fertile even when their gamete production is severely disrupted. A small part of a very large number can still be quite a large number. Only a single male gamete is required to fertilize an egg. So in this section, I cut out a bunch of this but he was pointing out like, so in a certain amount of this particular animal's semen, it produces this many billions of gametes. And so if it's if a hybrid is 1,000 times less fertile, it still has billions of gametes. So that's his point, right? A reciprocal cross is one occurring between the same two types of organisms, but with the sexes reversed. Now, I found this fascinating. So if you breed two species together, and then you do the same breeding but reverse the sexes of the species, it completely changes everything in a lot of cases.
Whoa.
That's weird, right?
Well,
I mean, it doesn't necessarily change the hybrid, but it changes whether it can work and all that kind of stuff.
But it kind of makes sense because of the, there's the mitochondrial DNA, which is coming from the mother.
That's true. You're right.
I don't know. I mean,
And then X and Y, the Y coming from the male.
Yeah. So he says, for example, a jackass crossing with a mare produces the common mule, but the reciprocal cross between a stallion and a jenny yields a different animal, the hinny, seldom produced by breeders. So, a mule is always the male donkey crossing with the female horse, I guess. If you do it the other way around, they call it the hinny. And they hardly ever do it. He says reciprocal crosses are not always of equal fertility. When domestic fowl roosters fertilize guinea fowl hens, egg fertility is about 70%. But when guinea fowl males inseminate domestic hens, the fertility rate is only 12%. Some crosses are easily obtained, even when the reciprocal cross is not. When stinging catfish milt was applied to walking catfish eggs, the fertilization rate was 90%. But when walking catfish supplied the male gametes for fertilization of stinging catfish eggs, no fertilization was observed. Like it was...
That is really strange.
What's going on here? The fertility of the hybrid offspring, as opposed to the fertility of the cross itself in producing hybrid offspring, can also depend on the direction of the cross. So in other words, if you're able to produce the hybrid, it will be different depending on which parent was the male, or which parent species had the male and which had the female. So he says Darwin found it remarkable that, quote, hybrids raised from reciprocal crosses, though of course compounded of the very same two species, the one species having first been used as the father and then as the mother, generally differ in fertility in a small and occasionally in a high degree, unquote. For example, when Michaelis in 1954 used pollen from the hairy willow herb to fertilize yellow willow herb, the resulting F1 hybrids were vigorous and fertile. However, when the cross was reversed, the offspring were abnormal in development and had sterile flowers. Wishart et al. In 1988 investigated male gamete production in hybrids between mule deer and white-tailed deer. They reported that a F1 hybrid sired by a white-tailed buck produced mature gametes, though they were less numerous than either pure parent and showed many abnormalities, while an F1 individual from the reciprocal cross produced none. Hybridization between these deer has produced a hybrid population that extends across the United States from Texas to Canada. But it only works in one direction. Sorry, what, Watcher?
He said, and it's delicious.
But yeah, it only.
So I have I have a proposed theory on why this may be occurring.
Okay.
So a lot of times it's presented as if we have a very good roadmap of the genome and like we know that this does this. It's not really though.
Right.
We can go to specific regions and say that like with some disorders, we do know exactly where the mutation occurs, right? And so we can find markers for that. But on things like, say, for example, eye color, there's a dozen at least different genes that are all going to play a role from different chromosomes, and they all come together somehow and influence eye color, shape, you know, if you're going to need glasses, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible because in a hybrid, you get two different alleles or two different versions of the same gene. And it's not like a dominant recessive thing when you're within the same species, whatever the hell that means now.
Yeah.
But you're getting a completely different version. Like in a liger, you're getting from the lion parent the darkness or, you know, the darkness of your coat. From the other one, you're getting stripe patterns.
Yeah. Right.
And so those are completely different. And depending upon, you know, are they sex related traits? So you've got an X coming from the mother, an X coming from the father for a girl. And then you flip it and I mean, it's hard convoluted, yeah. But I mean, I can see how it would occur. The part that
I'm just fascinated.
Maybe it has to do with incubation, like time in the womb and exposure to, I don't know. But
yeah, it's just
very
it's
interesting.
Strange how on the one hand, a type of hybrid cross can totally work, but if you do the reciprocal cross of the same hybrid type, you get nothing. Or you make a hybrid and it's very fertile, and you do a reciprocal cross of the same hybrid and it's almost completely sterile. That's just really fascinating to me.
I mean, yeah, that brings just the question in my mind. If you do the two reciprocal crosses and they're both reasonably fertile, then you cross those two F1 types.
And then what are you going to get?
Then what do you get?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
there's
the
so
F2.
many combinations.
Yeah.
But the F2 would be a new hybrid from the reciprocal crosses.
That's right.
Of F1s of each one.
That's right. You're right.
And so it's like, what does that?
That would be an F2 reciprocal. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's so many combos. People
take it easy, Dr. Moreau.
He actually had a graph on his website that showed all these lines of possibilities using all these types of hybridization. And he's like, here's how you can sort of work out. And breeders do this. They work out how they want to put traits into something, or, you know, they're like, okay, here's the target group of animals that I want a trait in that it doesn't have. And then here's these animals that do have the trait. And then they use these weird pattern things and like, okay, here's how
many different possible combinations they can do to see if they can get it.
Yeah. And then they do back crossing again and again and again, trying to get to stabilize the new hybrid version by backbreeding it with this or that parent species until it stabilizes and becomes relatively fertile to where natural breeding between those animals can maintain the population without all kinds of work.
Wow.
But the first hybrid,
big
are
part
starting
of
to make
modern
so much
cattle
more sense now.
Okay. Studying reciprocal crosses in the salamander genus Hinobius, Kawamura found that H. nebulosus females produce hybrids that are partially fertile in both sexes when crossed with H. nigrescens, but noted that a nearly complete gametic isolation seemed to be present when between nigrescens females and nebulosus males. In this cross, then, the reversal of the sexes had a radical effect on the outcome of the cross. In one direction, it produces partially fertile hybrids of both sexes, but in the other, the male gametes cannot even fertilize the eggs. So that's just more pointing out more of like how it's weird when you cross things, strange things happen. And like the male gametes can't even fertilize the eggs in the reciprocal cross of that version. It just completely stops working entirely. Given the facts thus far presented on the fertility of hybrids, it must be clear to the reader that many hybrids of unevaluated reproductive status would turn out to be partially fertile if they were tested. Additional evidence yet to be presented will further tend to confirm this conclusion. However, many people, when confronted with a hybrid, will assume it is sterile unless they are provided with evidence to the contrary. This presumption that hybrids of unknown reproductive ability are sterile is one of the tacit presuppositions mentioned in the introduction. This can have a potent effect on one's theoretical outlook. Since the great majority of hybrids have not been evaluated with respect to fertility, it does lead one to presume that most hybrids are sterile, an assumption that in turn prompts the conclusions that hybrids are, in general, evolutionary dead ends. Likewise, anyone who believes that forms should not be treated as distinct species if they produce hybrids that are not perfectly sterile will think that any two forms producing a partially fertile hybrid should be treated as belonging to the same species.
Great point. Yeah.
This assumption that hybrids of uninvestigated reproductive status are sterile, combined with the additional widespread misconception that hybrids are rare in a natural setting, makes hybrids seem far less interesting than they otherwise might. In fact, I am sure such presuppositions have gone far in preventing the study of hybrids. After all, from such a perspective, hybrids are freakish, sterile aberrations that can tell us little about natural processes and the ordinary course of evolution.
Yeah, so going back to the species thing, that it makes the term itself a self-fulfilling definition.
That's right. Yeah, it does. You're right.
Right. So it's more yeah, the way he wrote about it right there is kind of like, oh, they think it's a different species.
Yeah.
But you have to consider not necessarily that they're different or that they're the same.
Yeah.
Because that word is, because the idea of hybridization is sort of built into the definition of the word, that's why it does what it does. It's not...
That's right.
It's the problem with the word.
Yes, it's the problem with the word. Like he was trying to point out that, if everybody believed that dogs don't have fleas, and as soon as you find a dog that has fleas, it's not a dog.
That's right. Self-fulfilling definition.
That's right.
Yes.
If that's your only criteria, it freaking works every time. Dogs will never have fleas if you discover fleas on dogs and then you decide that they're not dogs. Okay, so this preconception can be self-perpetuating. Since many people think hybrids are irrelevant, they lack the interest to learn more and find out that such is not the case. The curiosity is also often lacking that might otherwise prompt researchers to conduct studies that would provide additional evidence that partially fertile hybrids do occur in the wild. An organism descended from matings between two or more parental types will mix the characteristics of those types. The analysis of a hybrid's traits will therefore often allow the identification of its parents. The traits of parents are expressed in hybrids in two typical ways. They are either intermediate or they are combined. A general understanding of the nature of trait variation in hybrids is necessary if one is to understand stabilization theory. With respect to most traits, size, color, texture, and so on, hybrids are typically intermediate between their parents. For example, Hubbs in 1955 evaluated a variety of fish hybrids. In summarizing his results, he states that, quote, intermediacy is seen in such external characterizations or characters as the coloration, the general body form, the size of the head, the length and protrusion of the snout, the size of the scales. Intermediacy may involve the type of relative growth. Internal characters, such as those of the skeleton, may also be transitional. When the values for the hybrids are computed as an index on a percentage scale grading from the value for the one parent set at 0 to the value for the other parent set at 100, the indices form a frequency distribution with the mode very close to 50. So that's always for the first hybrid version.
F1.
The F1, yeah. That they express all the way down to the frickin', and this guy wasn't, this was in the 50s, so he wasn't looking at DNA, but he was like all the way down to the molecular level. They express a very close to 50-50 intermediacy between the two parent species. Very interesting.
The two parent somethings,
whatever that means now. Yeah, like the Watcher said. Similarly, Grant in 1971 report that in Arizona, natural hybrids between two cactuses show intermediate variation with respect to a variety of morphological traits, such as stem joint diameter, color of the stems, the length and number of spines, and fruit texture and color. So, like, you look at the hybrid cactus and you can see, like, oh, yeah, that's like that parent, and this part is like that parent, and it's perfectly mixed in this and it's all working. Like, how does that even work? It's a functioning plant that has half traits from that parent and half traits from that parent, and somehow they, it's like Legos. They go together and they fit, and it still works somehow. I find that really interesting.
The ones that always kind of astound me, and I don't know if he talks about this in the next, few pages, but like the liger being massively huge compared to both a lion or a tiger that's purebred.
Some of that we do.
How the hell does that happen?
Yeah, so we do get into that later. We need to take a break, though.
That's right.
I just noticed the clock, folks.
Half of the show is now behind us, and the other half will be ahead of us. It's crazy.
Remember the Snake Bros portal philosophy, ladies and gentlemen. That is that if a random portal appears in front of you, you have to jump through it without hesitation. That is the Snake Bros portal philosophy. Dive through it without hesitation. Random portal.
That's right.
As long as you don't have kids. I mean, if you got kids, you probably shouldn't do that, but... Maybe it's just my portal philosophy. I don't know.
Nothing to lose, portal philosophy.
I mean, you don't want to spend the rest of your life wondering, man, what would have happened if I'd have jumped through that portal? That would be terrible. Okay. So back to the hybridization here. Intermediacy is seen not only in the physical characters of hybrids, but also in their behavior. Evans in 1966 reported that hybrids between sharp-tailed grouse and greater prairie chickens hold their wings further out during displays than do the prairie chickens, but not so far as the sharp-tailed grouse. Right? Hybrid hummingbirds often perform dive displays, which are intermediate between the parent species displays. So even behavioral traits, he's saying, are intermediate. The territorial displays of hybrid lizards on the island of Trinidad are intermediate too. And Koppel et al. In 1978 analyzed the acoustical behavior of hybrids between the Richardson's ground squirrel and the Wyoming ground squirrel in southwestern Montana and found that their chirps were intermediate between the two typical parental chirps. Cooper et al. In 1998 noted that the echolocation call frequency of hybrids between the eastern and large-eared horseshoe bats are intermediate between the parent bats. So the hybrids have a call that is about 40 kilohertz versus the 66 and 28 kilohertz of the parents.
Wow. So yeah, it results in the size of their larynx or whatever they call it in the bat is
halfway between.
Yeah, halfway between the two sizes.
Migration routes of hybrids are often midway between those of the parents. Gestation and incubation periods of hybrids are usually intermediate as well. Hybrid intermediacy involves the entire organism, and any trait can be affected.
That's wild.
Although intermediacy is the rule, a given type of hybrid may not be intermediate with respect to certain traits, and instead may approach one parental type or another. For example, in birds, the plumage pattern of a hybrid's head will often resemble that of one parent, while that of its body will resemble the other.
Aha! Who had a bald body on the eagle?
That's right.
Somehow, the bald eagle just got a bald head.
That's right. The vocalizations of hybrids.
It's a bat and a bird.
It's a bat and a bird, yeah. The vocalizations are a lizard and a bird. The vocalization of hybrids often unite features otherwise found only separately in their parents. Marler and Tenaza in 1977 said that the song of the female gibbon hybrid followed this pattern. Young et al. In 1994 described a junco sparrow hybrid, which too sang a song mixing those of its parents. Likewise, in studying natural hybrids between the smooth frog and the Victorian frog, which occur in southeastern Australia, Watson found that hybrid calls combine elements of the parental calls. The Victorian frog. It better have a top hat. Traits are combined even at the molecular level, so that hybrids produce a mixture of proteins, some inherited from one parent and some from the other. Protein subunits of heterogeneous origin may join in a hybrid to form a single functional unit. So during the break there, Watcher was talking about proteins, and Watcher, you were saying basically that they're kind of the same stuff in all animals, right? But here we have, he's saying, the proteins all the way down to that level are joined and they still function. So I find that really fascinating.
Essentially, the materials, the chemical linking in the proteins are the same.
The
thing that changes is the way that they're folded and the way that they bind.
Okay.
But, if you think of it in terms of like, let's say origami, right, with paper, and you're folding it up and you're folding it up, and then you've got something that looks entirely different, and you'd never even think that they'd have any kind of relation to each other, but you find one gap and a fold in each of them, and you go to push them together, and then they just fit perfectly. You're like, huh.
And
well, I'll be damned.
They're both made of paper. Also, is a good
right.
Okay.
And so then you end up with like a crane dragon or something. I don't know, but
a kraken. Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
I can do this hybrid naming thing.
Release the kraken.
Yeah, a kraken is better than a drain. So I don't think drain is a good name.
That's the reciprocal.
That's right. So what were you pointing? Kyle was pointing out to me why he's like, maybe this isn't so weird, right? What were you saying?
Well, I think that the idea stems from, or the problem with it, or the reason why it's fascinating in a way, is due to the fact that we have built this construct in our minds as
classical picture of
what a species is.
Yeah.
So it's like, man, these two totally different things can come together, and their traits are like half and half. But we see this, if you stick with the species idea, we see this within species because, like with people, for example, a mother and father can look so different, and they can have a child that's like halfway between them.
Yeah. You're right.
So if you get rid of the idea of species, since it's ambiguous and its definition is fulfilling, then it's kind of normal.
Yeah.
Seeming.
Yeah, you're right. And that's why people are like, oh, it has her nose and it's got his eyes or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Fine. It's not as mysterious as I wanted it to be.
Well, it's like, I'm not saying, no, it's cool. It's just the lines actually are blurred.
Yeah. That same kind of combining can work in vastly different animals.
Yes, yeah. It's just that the term makes us put them in boxes.
You're right. You're right. I have to get rid of those boxes.
So what if you look at it this way? Like, have you ever designed a character at the start of a game, right? And you like change all their features around, and and like you can adjust how tall they are, and like basically change all their physical characteristics.
Yeah.
This is the same. It's just you have to add things like how many scales do they have, or how much hair on their tail.
Yeah. Right.
Your parameters are just really not what you're used to, but it's the same general concept. I like that idea.
Yeah. That you can pick with hybridization. Basically, you can pick features from from across the kingdom of life.
Right.
Maybe not with plants. I don't know. Can you hybridize an animal with a plant?
Well,
You get a planimal?
I don't think the gametes are compatible. A planimal.
I can do this, guys. I'm good at this.
You got to go in with a planimal.
What were you going to say?
Well, I was just thinking that, how far down the F1, 2, 3, 4, whatever line, right? If you hybridize something over and over and over, it may get to a point where it's so drastically different, because you start with the hybrid, and then you get to say like F5 or something, and then you start bringing in
Other
ones that are not in this, not the same as the parent species or the hybrids of those parents, and you could get incredible complexity.
Yeah.
With that, and say 100,000 of them down the line may be completely unrecognizable, and at that point you wouldn't be able to, like, they may be so morphologically different that they couldn't possibly
Be identified. Yeah.
mate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like one could live in water and the other one could live on land.
Right. Water, snake, and chicken.
Water, snake, and chicken.
And it's interesting to look at it that way, because in Russ, it was what, Ringworld, Lewis Wu is essentially the same color as everybody, because they're all this sort of coppery, unified skin tone.
Yeah.
And there's these just common features to all humanity at that point. And I think in a closed population, eventually you'd start to get towards this middle of the line thing, but we don't see that with anything.
You're talking about stabilization. Is that what you're talking about?
Right. So that means that there's got to be some sort of variation to the breeding stock.
All right, I figured it out.
In theory.
Crab and fish. And then the fish has legs. And it can walk up on land.
Yeah.
And lay its eggs on land.
There you go.
And then something else on land can come and fertilize those eggs.
Yeah.
Fertilizes the eggs, and then they
Fertilizes
get
the krish.
Nice. Wait, how did the thing on land start on land?
Well, because other
Where'd
crabs
the land
and
thing
other
come from?
fish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Things in water have legs. They
do, yeah.
You don't have to be on land to have legs.
That's right.
So you don't have to start with a fish with no legs that suddenly got legs. I mean, there is a ground in water. It is another type of medium like air.
That's right.
It's just heavier.
Is this one of those give me one small miracle moments because lungs magically appear?
No, I'm not going there.
No.
I'm not going there. I'm just talking about
we're just talking about legs.
just talking about the fish leg story. And there is another way that fish can get legs.
That's right.
That's all I'm trying to say.
All right.
And they don't have to have anything to do with anything
all right.
on land. On dry land.
Yeah.
Because there is land in the ocean.
That's right.
At the bottom.
Fantastic points. All.
The wetlands.
That's right. Okay, so variation in later generations. In a natural setting, pure populations unaffected by hybridization are relatively uniform. F1 hybrids between such populations too will usually be uniform, even when the two parental forms differ rather markedly. This lack of variation results from each F1 hybrid receiving much the same genetic complement from each parental type each time this cross occurs. However, in crosses where later generation hybrids occur, a wide variety of types can arise because parental traits are variously combined in different individuals, which is kind of what you were talking about. As this goes on, the way the traits are combined can change drastically. Mm-hmm. For this same reason, high levels of morphological variability are a strong indication that a natural population is the product of hybridization. So again, high levels of variability morphologically are a strong indication that a natural population is a product of a hybrid. So,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Compound hybrids. Compound hybrids are produced by successive matings between more than two different types of organisms. For example, Sandnes in 1957 first produced a hybrid between a lady amherst's pheasant and a golden pheasant, and then mated that hybrid with a common pheasant to produce a three-way hybrid. Compound hybrids also occur in the wild. Thus, Harrison and Harrison in 1965 reported a presumed natural three-way hybrid of pintail duck with mallard and gadwall. In western Mexico, three fish, the headwater livebearer, the clearfin livebearer, and chubby livebearer, produce compound hybrids on an ongoing basis. Camp in 1945 argued that the common highbush blueberry of northeastern North America is the hybrid of four other types that he treats as separate species. Hybrids are even more complex, with even more complex ancestry are commonly obtained, such as five-way or six-way hybrids.
Yeah.
So then
it can get really confusing really fast.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So if I'm getting it right, the thing that he's pointing to with humans is think of like a specific trait, like eye color, for example, and all of the different colors that are potentially possible. Because there are so many, like you could go blue, gray, green, hazel, brown, shades within all of those. Violet happens every so often. That is the type of thing that points to hybridization in an organism, because there's so many options that you have that variability because of the variable traits that came from all of the things that made your final hybrid.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I think so. Morphologically, high morphological variation within what is considered to be a single, species is an indication, a good indication that that species is actually a product of hybridization at some point in the past.
That makes a lot of sense.
That can be.
I never would have thought of it.
Right. That can be eye color, like you said, skin color. He says that a lot of times it's size. So we'll get into that.
Okay.
Heterosis, broadly speaking, refers to any hybrid trait falling outside the range of parental variation. Such traits are said to be heterotic. Any trait can be heterotic, but most reports of heterosis involve the overall size of the hybrids. The California redwood, thought to be of hybrid origin, did you guys know this?
Nope.
Is the tallest tree in the world. Therefore, with respect to height, it is certainly not intermediate between its probable parents, the giant sequoia and the dawn redwood. I had no idea that the California redwood was a hybrid tree. That's awesome. One of the most famous trees in the world. And they're huge. And so what he's pointing out is that the fact that they're the biggest tree in the world means that that size can't be an intermediate between their parent species.
Yeah.
Similarly, the hybrid produced by a lion and a tigress, which is known as a liger, is usually larger and stronger than either of its parents. Whereas this reciprocal cross, which is between,
a lioness and a tiger.
Yeah. Tends to be smaller than either of the parents. And the reciprocal cross, by the way, is called the tigon. So between a lion and a tigress is a liger, and the other one is the tigon. The former cross, then, is an example of positive heterosis, in which the hybrid exceeds the range of variation exhibited by its parents, while the latter is an example of negative heterosis, in which the hybrid falls below the range of parental variation with respect to any given trait.
Man, that is weird.
Yeah. Heterosis is of particular evolutionary interest because it allows hybridization to produce new traits beyond the range of ordinary parental variation. In some crosses, the hybrids produced are actually more viable and vigorous than either parental type. For example, Rockwell et al. In 1961 say, "It is especially in their larger tolerances that the newer hybrid strains of garden lilies show their merits. Through selection of the sturdier species as seed or pollen parents, through years of testing and elimination of the weaker or less hardy plants, many new hybrid strains will grow and perform well where one or sometimes both of the parents may be grown only with the greatest of difficulty, if at all. Like the mule that has more strength and endurance than either of its parents, many of the hybrid lilies show more stamina and persistence than that commonly found among their ancestors." Given the fact that evolutionary biologists so often emphasize that hybrids are inviable, and as in fact many are, it is ironic that the phenomenon of hybrid vigor is so widely recognized by breeders. It is an extremely common and even typical phenomenon. So in other words, breeders of plants especially recognize that they can be stronger and better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Faster.
Yep. Smarter, probably. But yeah, I really find the size variation to be fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. Even as a young man, Darwin was aware that hybrids need not be intermediate. In his Voyages of the Adventure and Beagle, he remarks that the mule always appears to me a most surprising animal, that a hybrid should possess more reason, more memory, more obstinacy, social affection, and powers of muscular endurance than either of its parents seems to indicate that art here has outmastered nature.
That's
So I just had a thought.
here the assumptions in that.
Yeah. Yep. What thought, Watcher?
If we're talking hybridization, I think I might finally be starting to catch on to the theory.
Well,
Let's
not
say-
talking hybridization. What do you? You can,
Well, like let's say that the modern lion and the modern tiger, right? In their genealogical past, they are going to have giant, prehistoric cats, right? Like somewhere in there, there's some saber-toothed tiger maybe, or there's some giant,
Yeah.
some other type of cat. So when they cross,
those express.
all of those hybridized characteristics happen to line up correctly to where you get a throwback towards that giant stature.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very.
Oh my God, this whole idea just took on a new dimension for me. That's incredible.
Yeah, and Kyle and I were talking earlier today about, because obviously there's ideas of humans being hybrids, and now we have the giant human reports.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can just look at morphological variance in humans today. We have people who are enormous and people who are tiny. And that doesn't normally happen. I mean, there is some size variation in regular stable species, but I think that one of the things he's pointing out, and he does this more later, that I'll get into later, is that the variation in humans is so great that it indicates a hybrid past. And I think that,
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, we kind of know this in a sense because we have,
Because of the DNA studies and
yeah,
stuff.
we got Neanderthal genes in us and Denisovan genes in the Neanderthal
Pygmy
genes.
shorts.
Yeah.
Neanderthal jeans. Pygmy shorts. Denisovan shirts.
That's right.
So
And
this
buffalo.
also
Right.
could explain some very strange problems that geneticists have run into. For example, I don't know if you've ever seen, I think they were on Guinness, believe it or not, at one point, but the wolf children, the boys, they were just covered in hair, like from head to toe.
Yeah. Yep.
If you're hybridized, there you go. In the Dominican Republic, they have a thing called huevo doces, where at the age of 12, the testicles just drop off and they're accepted as women. Like, it's a thing in their culture. But amphibians and fish all throughout the kingdom, their respective classes, maybe it's family, whatever, they change sex all the time. That's how they explain it in Jurassic Park, the first one, you remember? Because they use frog DNA and then it changed genders.
Life,
so maybe that's what that is.
Finds a way.
Yep, that's what that was.
It certainly does.
Okay.
And that's crazy too.
Yeah, that they can change like that for the. I mean, there's some biological imperative that lets that happen.
So it's like the dinosaurs, being a sort of a cross between birds and reptiles.
Yeah,
And they're giant.
yeah, they are huge. Yeah, you're right. Some of them are giant. Yeah,
Yeah. I'm talking about the giant ones.
self-fulfilling definition. Okay. So, moreover, Darwin's later writings clearly show that he was familiar with the phenomenon of heterosis. In particular, in variation of animals and plants under domestication, he shows he knew non-intermediate hybrids had been repeatedly reported by a wide variety of breeders and investigators. But the book Variation, of course, has never been as popular or influential as The Origin of Species. However, Darwin's extensive knowledge of the effects of hybridization and of heterosis specifically is not reflected in The Origin of Species, where he used the incorrect claim that hybrids are always intermediate to discount the idea that new types of organisms can be derived from hybridization. For example, every edition of The Origin of Species published during his lifetime contained the following statement, quote, "By crossing, we can get only forms in some degree intermediate between their parents," unquote. In this way, a false claim became an axiom of subsequent evolutionary thought. So I think what he's pointing out here is like Darwin was up to something. There was some weirdness there because he wrote other books and other papers where he was...
Yeah, well, he was just quoting him about the mule.
Yeah, that's right. And they had an Origin of Species. He says we can only be intermediate. He
Yeah.
knew.
That's really weird.
So, hybrid zones. A geographic region where genetically distinct natural populations come into contact and hybridize is known as a hybrid zone. A hybrid zone, especially a wide hybrid zone, can also be viewed as a naturally occurring hybrid population. Hybrid zones are found in all major groups of sexual organisms. The pure parental populations on opposite sides of a hybrid zone may differ with respect to almost any type of characteristic and appearance, behavior, physiology, or calls. Many hybrid populations exhibit a continuum of variation, spanning the gap between parental types. Within a population composed of partially fertile hybrids, the hybrids occupying regions closer to a particular parental type tend to be more similar to that parent. So we were talking,
breeding back into the
that's
parent.
right. They're back crossing naturally.
Yeah.
Back into the parent stuff.
Something.
That's right. Can't use species anymore.
Well, what did he say there? He said
He
genetically...
just says more similar to that parent.
No. In the very beginning of that statement, he says the genetically similar or something like that.
He calls them parental types.
Right at the beginning
A
of that thing you just read, he says it.
geographic region?
No, he's talking about this, not the species, but he says a genetically similar group of whatever.
Who don't see genetically. Many hybrid populations exhibit a continuation of variance spanning the gap between parental types. Within a population composed of partially fertile hybrids, the hybrids occupying the regions closer to a particular parental type tend to be more similar to that parent.
Okay. Must have been the paragraph before. That's all right.
Okay.
Moving on.
It's in there. If I said it, it's in there. You guys can rewind and hear it.
Genetically distinct.
There you
That's
go.
what he said.
Yeah. Okay. Many natural hybrid zones are mobile. The hybrid zone in eastern North America between the golden-winged and blue-winged warblers moves every year. So as those two bird types change, or they have more of them or less of them, or the birds themselves are shifting around, the hybrid zone is moving in response to that.
That's wild.
This I found really fascinating. Extinction. Hybridization in some cases can lead to the extinction of one of the hybridizing forms. So this may be what you're talking about with the fish in your article with the sturgeon or whatever. Extinction by this means is most often observed when interbreeding is extensive and one hybridizing type is far outnumbered by the other. The rusty grebe was confined to Lake Alatra on Madagascar, where it hybridized so intensely with the invading little grebe that it seems already to have ceased to exist as a separate genetic entity. Two other birds, the yellow-throated miner and black-eared miner, hybridize extensively in southeastern Australia. Contact occurs just east of Adelaide. Backcrossing results in a continuum of hybrids, with the darkest almost indistinguishable from the black-eared miner and the palest almost like the yellow-throated miner. The yellow-throated ranges over most of Australia, while the black-eared has a restricted range, and virtually no pure flocks of the black-eared miner remains. So there's so few of them, and they've been hybridizing in with the yellow-throated, and now there's no pure flocks of the black ones left. They're all basically.
So in a way, it's extinction.
That's right. It is a type of extinction, even though they're actually joining into another species and getting more and more of them. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I had that thought last week where I was like, who's to say that the dodo bird is extinct? It's just bird.
It's just what?
Lying dormant some.
Yeah, in the genes of some other bird. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or lizard. Who knows?
Or lizard. Or giant lizard.
Expansion of a new form of hybrid origin that is fitter than its parents can also lead to local extinction of its progenitors. An increasing number of well-documented examples are becoming available of natural hybrids that are adaptively superior to their parents. Thus, after the rusty crayfish was introduced to Wisconsin and Michigan, it hybridized with the native northern Clearwater crayfish. And Perry et al. In 2001 found that the hybrids were superior to both parents in competing for limited food resources, and that hybridization consequently poses a threat to the native crayfish. A similar case is that of the hybrid between the mallard and the Pacific black duck, which is displacing its parents from New Zealand. Hedge et al. In 2006 recently showed that extensive hybridization between two radishes that have become naturalized in California have produced hybrids that are so fit that they have brought on the local extinction of the parent groups. Breeders commonly use artificial selection to produce new breeds from the variable offspring of hybrid crosses. In particular, they have long used a process known as the backcross breeding method to obtain new types of organisms. The approach is to identify a type possessing some desirable trait and then to hybridize it with a target stock lacking that trait. If hybrids are obtained, the next step is to backcross them to the target stock in order to introduce the trait. And basically, the process is as follows. 1. Individuals from the target stock are crossed with some other stock having the trait. So this target stock is the one you want to introduce the trait to.
Right.
So you cross them with some other stock that has the trait. 2, hybrids with the trait are backcrossed to the target stock, the parents. 3, backcross progeny exhibiting the trait are selected for further backcrossing or bred among themselves. 4, selection over ensuing generations stabilizes the trait and eliminates other undesirable traits that may be present, low fertility, which is prominent among these. So they try to select ones that have higher fertility to backcross, so on and so forth. And 5, the new breed becomes stable when hybrid individuals of both sexes are sufficiently fertile to maintain the breed without further backcrossing. Breeders have been doing this for thousands of years.
That's great. Crap.
There's actually a really good example of that in the beef cattle world.
Yep. He had
where
a
they
whole
took
bunch
the
of
American
examples.
bison.
Yeah. Beefalo. Is that what you're talking
Your
about?
cows, the beefalo.
Yeah.
The beefalo.
That's right. I know these words. All right. We got to take another break. Come back with more hybrid stuff. It's about to get really weird. Can't wait.
I'm not good at the hybrid thing. I was trying to come up with a snake hybrid.
A snickin'?
Yes.
I can do this. I'm good at this guy.
Snickets! Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Coprolite Studies, where there are no degrees, only certificates of ignorance that you have to print yourself or draw with crayons or cave painting.
Bust out the crayons.
Get your scribe to make you a scroll of it. However you do it.
Yeah.
You got to do it.
Dust off the typewriter.
That's right.
Okay. So this might be a really long final segment.
I'm good with that. Well,
Okay.
we can make a special
A special 5-segment show.
fifth segment. Yeah. The fifth segment.
Oh my God. The Bengal cat, a popular coyote breed, was introduced in the 1980s by hybridizing the domestic cat to the Asiatic leopard cat. This work was carried out primarily by Jean S. Mill of Millwood Bengals Cattery in Covina, California. I did not know.
What do you do? Oh, I run a cattery.
A cattery. A cattery. She began with the partially fertile female backcross hybrids to domestic cats. After further backcrossing these hybrids to domestics, she obtained partially fertile males. The hybrids were then bred among themselves. Subsequent selection produced a cat with both the exotic coat of a leopard cat, but with the amiable disposition of a domestic.
Uh-huh.
So she breeds them together and only gets fertile females at first. So she's backcrossing them until finally she gets a fertile male and then starts breeding the hybrid
Population together.
together and mixing and matching and going backcrossing until she gets the traits she wants. The
I mean,
color-
this seems like a huge pain in the ass, but it also seems like it would be really interesting to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to try it with bugs. That's easy. Just open the cube door with the lights on, let some bugs in, give them some lettuce,
Yeah.
and leave. Maybe eventually there will be some
Get
weird
yourself a
bug.
praying scorpion.
God, no.
Long ago, Darwin pointed out that hybrids are not always sterile. So we're going back to this with Darwin here. Quote, finally, looking to all the ascertained facts on the intercrossing of plants and animals, it may be concluded that some degree of sterility, both in first crosses and in hybrids, is an extremely general result, but it cannot, under our present state of knowledge, be considered as an absolute universal, unquote. But even today, many biologists pay little heed to this fact, although a vast number of reports have since accumulated demonstrating that many hybrids are partially fertile. Indeed, there are probably far more cases of this sort known today than Darwin would ever have anticipated. So this section has provided a wide variety of examples demonstrating that the fertility of hybrids varies from cross to cross and individually depending on the sex, age, and genetic constitution of the individual in question. It is also shown that hybridization is a widespread natural phenomenon and that many hybrids have even been treated as species or subspecies, and a huge number of natural hybrid zones are now known. We have seen that many kinds of hybrids are partially fertile and that they vary greatly not only in their fertility, but with respect to many other traits. These facts have fundamental implications for biological thought. If many types of natural hybrids have the ability to conceive offspring, the opportunity exists for natural selection to act to increase fertility with each passing hybrid generation. Fertility responds to artificial selection by breeders, much like any other heritable trait that varies from one individual to another. Certainly, fertility varies from one hybrid individual to another and from one type of cross to another as well. The potential evolutionary significance of hybridization becomes especially apparent if we consider the fact that hybrid vigor is characteristic of a wide variety of crosses. If stereotypes are left behind and hybrids are viewed as individual organisms with individual characteristics, their varying fertility and a myriad of other variable traits can be seen in another light and as unshapen clay awaiting the hands of natural selection.
Wow. Yeah.
But I think one of the big points here he wants to make is if stereotypes are left behind, in other words, the stereotypes of species and so on and so forth, and hybrids, but I would add to this, hybrids and other animals are viewed as individual organisms.
Right. Instead of trying to say
These are all part of this
one big
block
thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
This immutable type.
Yes.
Okay. Now we're going to get weird. Human hybrids. So basically, what we ended on there was his conclusion of those sections. After that, he went into lots and lots of genetic detail, lots and lots of cellular biology detail, stuff that when I was going through, I was like, this is just going to be too tough to read on the show. So I would encourage anybody to go to the website if you want to keep going down that line of reasoning, because he does have a whole bunch more on there on this. So now we're skipping to his whole section on the website about human hybrids specifically. So that's what the topic is now. So he says this section is a little different from others on this site because it's about the findings of my own research. I am a University of Georgia trained geneticist with a PhD who worked in various genetics laboratories at the University of Georgia and conducted research there from 1989 to 2007. During those years, I also taught biology and genetics at the University of Georgia. My work focuses on hybrids and particularly the role of hybridization in the evolutionary process. Here, I report certain facts which seem to indicate that human origins can be traced to hybridization, specifically hybridization involving the chimpanzee. So, why do I think humans are hybrids? Well, first of all, I've had a different experience from most people. I've spent most of my life, the last 30 years, studying hybrids, particularly avian and mammalian hybrids. I've read thousands of reports describing them, and this experience has dispelled some mistaken ideas I once had about hybrids, notions that I think many other people continue to take for granted. For example, one widespread but erroneous belief is that all hybrids are sterile. This idea keeps a lot of people from even considering the possibility that humans might be of hybrid origin. The reality, however, is something quite different. For instance, in reviewing the reports I collected for my book on hybridization in birds, which documents some 4,000 different kinds of hybrid crosses among birds, I found that those crosses producing partially fertile hybrids are about 8 times as common as crosses known to produce sterile ones. The usual result is a reduction in fertility, not absolute sterility. My current work documenting hybridization among mammals shows that partially fertile natural hybrids are common too in mammals, and yet it seems that most people base their ideas of hybrids on the common mule, which is an exceptionally sterile hybrid and not at all representative of hybrids as a whole.
It's true for me.
Yeah,
it's exactly,
me too.
Yeah.
First thing you think of is the mule. Right. And
it's totally sterile.
Almost completely sterile.
Doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
Don't try it.
Dead end. He says, I should perhaps also mention the differences in parental chromosome counts, even rather large differences, do not preclude the production of fertile hybrids. While differences of this sort do bode ill for the fertility of the resulting progeny, this is only a rule of thumb. In other words, sometimes it doesn't bode ill for the fertility. But he says most of the time it does, but sometimes, somehow, it doesn't.
Yeah, so before I lose this thought, I could be way off here, but it's just what occurred to me while you were reading that introduction, that the fertility thing, I'm wondering if it is somehow connected. Well, I don't know. It occurred to me that like the fertility aspect of it is that's the element that keeps this tendency for hybridization to be from being completely out of control, right? So there's some pattern perhaps in the fertility situation that's like, okay, it's like however life evolved, it evolved in such a way that this is more rare than the stable individuals interbreeding normally, right? So it's like this has arisen for some reason. This has come about for some reason. But that built into it is still a possibility that certain interbreedings can produce something, right? And then that can eventually become stable.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know it's hard for me to explain it in a nutshell what I'm trying to think of. It's like the fertility aspect is this sort of guide through the natural environment that allows, because without that, there is this war going on between the species or between the individuals for the resources, and they get into these ecological niches where they can be stable, right? Without that sort of hybridization
boundary or
barrier, then it could be chaotic.
it's like a semi-permeable barrier.
That's right.
Yeah. It's not no barrier, but it's not a total wall either. It's
right, but
semi-permeable.
it's like it's this perfect balance in a way that preserves ecological niches, because you have to take this all the way down to the base level. Like, it's not just the animals that are what am I trying to say? They're trying to get the resources. Those resources are also animals. Those resources are also plants.
Yeah.
That also have that barrier.
Yeah.
So that you can get this entire stable ecological system.
Yeah.
But if everything was able to sort of hybridize and create new things with traits, it would be unstable. It would be incredibly unstable.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah. I think in some of the previous quotes we read on the earlier shows where he was quoting Darwin was pointing out that that things aren't immutable, but if they were totally mutable, then it would be chaos, right? Yeah. So that's kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, it's like it's like it's a guide or something. It allows for the adaptation to new situations. It's slow enough that the entire system can sort of adapt to the new species, or what we're trying to get rid of that word, to the new individuals.
Yeah.
Distinct individuals.
Yeah, to the new distinct types.
Because you can imagine this is happening. Is this happening on the molecular level, or the with bacteria and all that
the
kind
cellular
of stuff?
level. Yeah, the single celled. Yeah, and the other thing I was thinking of too is this extinction stuff. Like this idea that we're like, oh man, things go extinct and we lose this animal type. Well, maybe not. I mean, you go out to where it went extinct and its genes are going to be in hybrid types around its previous zone. You know? And so if you wanted, you could extract those genes and try to make new versions of the parent species. Like that, what it was called, the black-eared miner bird, where there's no pure phlox left.
Yeah.
But all of its data is still extant in the existing birds there.
Right.
It's just being merged in. It's not gone extinct. It's just...
Right. So, for example, if the chimpanzee went extinct, well, we still have like 98% of its DNA.
Right. Yeah. That's right.
And maybe something else has the other, 2%.
Yeah. I think this is all...
And those hybrids could then bring it back.
Yeah.
That's really just, I don't know.
I also find it to be a much more interesting method of this kind of thing happening than random, like, nuclear mutation caused by, something being hit by some alpha particle.
Yeah,
from space.
But that could happen.
Yeah.
It's probably far less likely,
right,
than stable hybrids.
Yeah.
But you throw that in as a player in this vast amount of time that we've had.
Yep. And that is a player.
That's a player.
Yeah. I'm just saying that this is cool and this also explains, this is very interestingly to me explaining, I start to look at it, and I don't know why I'm doing this, but I start to look at it again as like, we live in a universe of pure information. All this data is there. all of us have this data in us. If all this hybridization has been going on for all this time, then there's pieces of dinosaur DNA in everything.
Yeah, so I'm thinking like we go to we take some probe to another planet, we find one little remnant of some piece of life, and we get the DNA out of it. That it could tell us
just about everything that all life that's ever existed on that planet.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. The data is there. And this is one of the things that people have pointed out about how the DNA structure is so amazing at storing data. And that's what it is. You got every cell in your body has this enormous amount of data in it. And hidden in that data is information about all life on this planet and probably out in the cosmos too. It's just really cool, this idea.
That's really cool.
That it's a data preservation thing. And that data is not lost because a species that goes extinct has hybridized with something. So its data is in those hybrid types that are back crossing back into the other parent.
A backup to the backup to the backup to the backup. That's right.
That's right. That's right. It's a RAID system for DNA data. Okay. Where did I read here? Okay, so a second so-called fact, which might make it seem impossible for humans to have had a hybrid origin, is the equally erroneous notion that hybrids, especially successful hybrids, do not occur in a state of nature. A third is the mistaken idea that only plants hybridize and never animals. In fact, however, natural, viable, fertile animal hybrids are abundant. A wide variety of such hybrids occur on an ongoing basis. For example, of the more than 4,000 different types of hybrid crosses listed in my book on hybridization in birds, approximately half of them are known to occur in natural settings. My current research indicates a comparable rate for mammals. And I must now emphasize a fact that I, as a geneticist, find somewhat disappointing. Though there are other ways of detecting them, with nucleotide sequence data, it can be very difficult to identify later generation backcross hybrids derived from several repeated generations of backcrossing. And this would be especially true of any remote descendants of backcross hybrids produced in ancient times, which is what I am proposing humans may actually be. Instead, as is the case with other later generation backcross hybrids, the most revealing data is of an anatomical and or physiological nature. And this is exactly the kind of hybrid that humans seem to be. That is, it appears that humans are the result of multiple generations of backcrossing to the chimpanzee. The thing that makes backcross hybrids hard to analyze using genetic techniques is that, in terms of nucleotide sequences, they can differ very little from the parent to which the backcrossing occurs. It's important to realize, however, that a lack of such differences does not prevent them from differing anatomically. Sequence differences are not necessary for anatomical differences to be present. An obvious example of this phenomenon is Down's syndrome. Individuals affected by Down's regularly exhibit certain distinctive anatomical features, and yet in terms of their nucleotide sequences, they do not differ in any way from other humans. To detect someone with Down syndrome, sequence data is completely useless. But with anatomical data, detecting affected individuals is easy. The key fact is that with Down syndrome, the differences that we see are due to differences in the number of genes present, that is, dosage differences, and not to differences in the nucleotide sequences of those genes. And dosage differences of this sort are exactly what hybridization typically produces. Another observation that appears significant in connection with the theory of human origins here under consideration is that it has been well known for decades that human sperm is abnormal in comparison with that of the typical mammal. Human sperm are not of one uniform type, as in the vast majority of all other types of animals. Moreover, human sperm is not merely abnormal in appearance, but a high percentage of human sperm are actually dysfunctional. These and other facts demonstrate that human fertility is low in comparison with that of other mammals. Infertility and sperm abnormalities are characteristics of hybrids. So, this finding suggests that it's reasonable to suppose, at least for the sake of argument, that human origins can be traced to a hybrid cross. It is also consistent with the idea that the hybridization in question was between two rather distinct and genetically incompatible types of animals. That is, it was a distant cross. The chimpanzee is plausible in the role of one of the parents that crossed to produce the human race because they are generally recognized as being closest to humans in terms of their genetics. But then the question arises, if an ancient cross between the chimpanzee and some parental form produced the first humans, then what was that other parent? Does it still exist, and what was it like? As the reader might imagine, if the assumption is correct that one of our parents is the chimpanzee, then it should be possible to actually identify the other parent as well. A hybrid combines traits otherwise seen only separately in the two parental forms from which it is derived. And it is typically intermediate to those parents with respect to a wide range of characters. Naturalists routinely use these facts to identify the parents of hybrids of unknown origin and even backcross hybrids. First, they posit a particular type of organism as similar to the putative hybrid. In the present case, this organism would be the chimpanzee. Then they list traits distinguishing the hybrid from the hypothesized parent. And this list of distinguishing traits will describe the second parent.
Wow, that's cool.
A detailed analysis of such a triad will often establish the parentage of the hybrid. The traits in question in such studies are generally anatomical, not genetic. DNA evidence is used in only a very small percentage of such identifications, and even then, rarely in efforts to identify backcross hybrids. And yet, firm conclusions can generally be reached. So in the specific case of humans, if the two assumptions made thus far are correct, i.e. 1, that humans actually are hybrids, and 2, that the chimpanzee actually is one of our two parents, then a list of traits distinguishing human beings from chimpanzees should describe the other parent involved in the cross. And by applying this sort of methodology, I did in fact succeed in narrowing things down to a particular candidate. That is, I looked up every human distinction that I could find. And so long as it was cited by an expert, a physical anthropologist or an anatomist, etc., I put this on a list. And that list, which includes many traits, consistently describes a particular animal. And why might one suppose that humans are backcross hybrids of the sort just described? Well, the most obvious reason is that humans are highly similar to chimpanzees at the genetic level, closer than they are to any other animal. If we were descended from F1 hybrids without any backcrossing, we would be about halfway, genetically speaking, between chimpanzees and whatever organism was the other parent. But we are not. Genetically, we're close to chimpanzees, and yet we have many physical traits that distinguish us from chimpanzees. And this exactly fits the backcross hypothesis. Many characteristics that clearly distinguish humans from chimps have been noted by various authorities over the years. The task of preliminarily identifying a likely pair of parents then is straightforward. Make a list of all such characteristics, and then see if it describes a particular animal. One fact, however, suggests the need for an open mind. As it turns out, many features that distinguish human from chimpanzees also distinguish them from all other primates. Features found in human beings, but not in other primates, cannot be accounted for by hybridization of a primate with some other primate. If hybridization is to explain such features, the cross will have to be between a chimpanzee and a non-primate, an unusual and distant cross, to create such an unusual creature. The fact that even modern-day humans are relatively infertile may be significant in this connection. If a hybrid population does not die out altogether, it will tend to improve in fertility with each passing generation under the pressure of natural selection. Fossils indicate that we have had at least 200,000 years to recover our fertility since the time that the first modern humans, or Homo sapiens, appeared. The earliest creatures generally recognized as human ancestors date to about 6 million years ago. So, our fertility has had a very long time to improve. If we have been recovering for thousands of generations and still show obvious symptoms of sterility, then our earliest human ancestors, if they were hybrids, must have suffered from an infertility that was quite severe. This line of reasoning, too, suggests that the chimpanzee might have produced Homo sapiens by crossing with a genetically incompatible mate, possibly even one outside of the primate order. So for the present, I ask the reader to reserve judgment concerning the plausibility of such a cross. I'm an expert on hybrids, and I can assure you that our understanding of hybridization at the molecular level is still far too vague to rule out the idea of a chimpanzee crossing with a non-primate. Anyone who speaks with certainty on this point speaks from prejudice, not knowledge. Looking at a subset of the listed traits, however, it's clear that the other parent in this hypothetical cross that produced the first human would be an intelligent animal with a protrusive, cartilaginous nose. I'm not sure how to say that. It's cartilage.
Like cartilage.
Yeah, cartilage nose. A thick layer of subcutaneous fat, short digits, and naked skin. It would be terrestrial, not arboreal, and adaptable to a wide range of foods and environments. These traits may bring a particular creature to mind. In fact, a particular non-primate does have not only each of the few traits just mentioned, but every one of the many traits listed to the side. So, okay, let me stop here and we'll go look at some of these because I didn't put these in the file that I made, but he's got a whole list of features. He calls them human traits not seen in other primates. So in dermal features, he's got like naked skin, thick epidermis, large content of elastic fiber in skin, thermoregulatory sweating, a whole bunch of other stuff. Epidermal liquids contain triglycerides and free fatty acids. And then in facial features, he's got lightly pigmented eyes are common, protruding nose, narrow eye opening, short, thick upper lip, eyebrows, heavy eyelashes, earlobes. Features relating to being bipedal, short dorsal spines on the first 6 cervical vertebrae, fewer floating and more non-floating ribs, more lumbar vertebra, fewer sacral vertebra, short pelvis relative to body length, right? So there's just a huge list here. I can't go through all of them. Short digits, narrow pelvic outlet, and then organs, multi-pyramidal kidneys.
Of course.
Straight to pyramids. Explains all the pyramids. Mystery solved. Vocal ligaments. Let's see. Nipples are low on the chest. Bicornuate uterus. I'm not sure what that means. Cranial features. Got brain lobes, frontal and temporal prominent. Thermoregulatory venous plexuses, well-developed system of emissary veins and large nasal bones, divergent eyes, styloid process, large occipital condyles. A whole bunch of stuff I don't understand, but he's just listing these are things that no primate has, but humans all have. Or most humans have, right? Thick tooth enamel, heliacal chewing. We chew in a circle. wrong, right? Other traits, nocturnal activity. Particular about places of defecation, which is this is an interesting thing. Good swimmer, no fear of water. Tears is a trait that we have that I guess primates don't have. Our eyes, tear. Terrestrialism, which he already said, we don't like trees. We don't want to live in trees. Most of us don't want to live in trees. Able to exploit a wide range of environments and foods, heart attacks, and cancer. These things are all things that. So there's a huge list here. You can go to the website to check it out, but I just wanted to read a couple of those to give you the idea that he does have a pretty good list. Okay. So he says, ask yourself, is it likely that an animal unrelated to humans would possess so many of the human characteristics that distinguish us from primates? That is, could it be a mere coincidence? It's only my opinion, but I don't think so. Of course, it must be admitted that two human traits do at first seem to pose a contradiction. The animal I have in my mind lacks a large brain and it is not bipedal. An analysis of the relevant anatomy, however, reveals that these two human features can be understood as synergistic, or heterotic effects resulting from the combination in humans of certain traits previously found only separately in the two posited parent forms. Nevertheless, even initially, these two flies in the theoretical ointment fail to obscure the remarkable fact that a single non-primate has all of the simple, non-synergistic traits distinguishing humans from their primate kin. Such a finding is strongly consistent with the hypothesis that this particular animal once hybridized with the chimpanzee to produce the first humans. In a very simple manner, this assumption immediately accounts for a large number of facts that otherwise appear to be entirely unrelated. So, what is this other animal that has all these traits? The answer is Sus scrofa, the ordinary pig. What are we to think of this fact? If we conclude that pigs did in fact cross with apes to produce the human race, then an avalanche of old ideas must crash to earth. But of course, the usual response to any new perspective is, that can't be right because I didn't already believe it. This is the very response that many people had when Darwin first proposed that humans might be descended from apes, an idea that was perceived as ridiculous or even as subversive and dangerous. And yet today, this exact viewpoint is widely entertained. Its wide acceptance can be attributed primarily to the established fact that humans hold many traits in common with primates. That's what made it convincing. But perhaps Darwin told only half the story. Scientists argue that humans are related to chimpanzees because humans share so many traits with chimpanzees. Is it not rational then also, if pigs have all the traits that distinguish humans from other primates, to suppose that humans are also related to pigs? Let us consider then the hypothesis that humans are the product of ancient hybridization between pig and chimpanzee. Given the facts presented in this discussion of stabilization theory on this website, it seems highly likely that humans are hybrids of some kind. This particular hypothesis concerning the nature of our parentage is, as we shall see, a fruitful one. For the present, there's no need to make a definite decision on the matter, but certain lines of reasoning do suggest the idea should be taken seriously. First of all, the notion is set forward strictly as a hypothesis. No claim whatever is made that it is actually a fact that humans somehow arose through hybridization of pigs with chimpanzees. In contrast, proponents of the idea that humans are closely related to apes and not to pigs often speak as if their case has been proved beyond doubt. But of course it is not. The wide acceptance of this idea may actually be due to the lack of any competitive theory. I merely propose an evaluation of two distinct hypotheses by the usual scientific criterion. The hypothesis less consistent with available data should be rejected.
All right.
Break time.
I'm worried about the fact that I love bacon.
Bacon. I know. Bacon is on my mind right now.
Are pigs cannibals?
I'm pretty hungry.
This is possibly bad.
Bet you thought it was the end of the show. It's totally not.
Time for a BLT.
But in here that I was looking at comments, people were saying stuff, and they're calling it the chimp pig, right? The chimp pig hybrid. And I'm like, no, it's the pimpanzee. Come on, man. Chimp pig is lame. Pimpanzee, bro. This explains a lot of stuff, man.
Pimpanzee.
That's right. It's the pimpanzee, man. You know what I'm saying, player?
Jeez.
Okay.
But, this could easily be, well, maybe not. I was thinking this could be tested. Somebody could try to hybridize a pig and a chimp.
Yeah.
But since it's probably been a long time,
They may
and
not be
they've
the same.
probably hybridized already
Yeah.
up to a point to where it may not work.
Yeah.
could have worked at some point due to the current stage of hybridization amongst the distinct individuals.
Yeah. You're
But
right.
still, I mean,
Could be done. Could be tried.
Could be tried. Attempted.
So
So this
he-
guy has, and he's just not saying so. He's working on it.
He's working on the chimpanzee. He says, even if we could identify some objective unit of measure for distance or similarity, which is not at all a straightforward problem, we would still expect some crosses to be more distant than others. That is, the various types of possible crosses would constitute a continuum. Many would be close and some would be very distant, but we would expect at the least a rare few to be very distant. While these few might be rare, they might be among the most interesting because they would offer an opportunity to obtain something radically different. Perhaps it is only a subjective bias, but I believe that a human being, when taken as a whole, is radically different from a chimpanzee. And I think, so I need to probably point this out because I understand what he's saying there because of stuff that I read through the website. But he was basically saying that he had a bunch of examples where he was showing where, okay, so people were perpetually trying to hybridize these two animal types, and they kept getting different results in terms of fertility and sometimes in terms of morphology, and sometimes they would get one that was just awesome, right? It was really fertile, and it was really strong, and it was really, really vigorous when every other hybridization attempt between those same two parent species resulted in less viable, less vigorous.
Yeah.
So that's what he's pointing out, is that maybe that there was a special that this is a special case where the hybridization generated something that was just revolutionary in terms of the type.
I also want to point out that this is interesting in terms of the idea that our DNA is less than 2% different from some other creature.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's like the morphological differences can be incredible.
Yeah.
Right. They can be very, very different
Yeah.
and distinct. So that's really strange.
Yeah. Especially when you see the whole list of all the differences that he lists out.
Yeah.
So if people go to the website and look at that, it's a very...
But I guess you could also say, well, that 2% is a ridiculous amount of information.
It's a lot of data. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 60 million base pairs or something like that.
I'm also reminded of the twin in outer space,
Yep.
where they have the DNA that suddenly certain traits switch on.
Yep.
There
Space
could also
genes.
be a lot of that here, where you've just got tons of different,
Switches.
potential,
Yeah.
switches that could be expressed.
Right. And that will express epigenetically, right? They turn on due to the environmental pressures or whatever of the organism during its lifetime.
Oh wow!
I was thinking about this in terms of
as the
allergies.
switches flip,
I was thinking
we
about
had this beneficial mutation.
Yeah, I was just you were talking about plants and animals.
Yeah.
Well, now you're bringing up this epigenetic thing.
Yeah.
Well, we're constantly being inundated by all of this pollen and
Yeah.
plant particles and things that go into our bodies, and then we have some weird reactions, and there's like, I don't know a whole lot about it, but the peptides and all that kind of stuff in the cells that these plant particles or pollens or something will like fit into these little
Yeah, they bond to or something.
yeah, and that causes all kinds of crazy stuff to happen.
Yeah.
And
They're trying to make hybrids in our
You're
bodies.
not
Like,
yeah,
no.
you're not initially allergic to something,
Yeah.
but you can gain this allergy.
Yeah. Especially when you think about what pollen is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. We're like constantly being like they're trying to mate with us.
That's right. Nonstop. Yeah.
And so I wonder, my point is I'm wondering how much
Variation that causes.
variation that
Oh, yeah.
causes over the thousands and thousands of years of living in those environments.
Yeah.
And I mean, it would be impossible to figure out because we don't have access to those thousands of years old
Yeah. That's right.
specimens.
Yep. I mean, there are pollen caught in the ice cores in some places.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
that isn't going to tell you everything. Yeah, for
yeah, I'm
sure.
talking about the behavioral traits
Oh,
and
yeah,
all
yeah,
of that
yeah.
type of stuff that might
Yeah,
come about, right?
yeah. Man, what behavioral traits might you get from plants? That would be a really interesting thing to
Well, I
figure
mean,
out.
they cause me to behave in many different ways. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
And people change where they live. Like if you go somewhere and you've got all these crazy allergies, like get me
Yeah.
out of here.
Right. You're right.
So you end up creating a situation where animals don't want to go into an area because of the plant kingdom there.
Yeah.
Along with the other animals that are there. And so
Right.
they're sort of the pressures of those systems are pushing them into certain areas where they then hybridize with whatever's there. And
Yeah.
it's so the plants are playing a role even in the animal kingdom is my point, right? Not only for the food, but the allergies and the other things.
Yeah.
that-
They're causing various environmental situations and pressures. And
Yeah.
Yes.
It's-
Yep. You're totally right. On the other hand, he
You
says,
are what you eat.
Yeah, you are what you yeah, bacon. If we compare first humans with non-mammals or invertebrates, e.g. a crocodile or a bullfrog, octopus or dragonfly or starfish, then pigs and chimpanzees suddenly seem quite similar to humans. Relative impressions of close and far are subjective and depend on the context. Pigs and chimpanzees differ in chromosome counts. The opinion is often expressed that when two animals differ in this way, they cannot produce fertile hybrids. This rule is, however, only a generalization. While such differences do tend to have an adverse effect on the fertility of hybrid offspring, it is also true that that many different types of crosses in which the parents differ in chromosome counts produce hybrids that are themselves capable of producing offspring. As Annie P. Gray noted in the preface to her reference work, Mammalian Hybrids in 1972, which compiled information about all known hybrid mammals, no close correlation was found between the chromosome count or the duration of gestation and the ability of the species to hybridize. There have been no systematic or scientific surveys of the crossability of mammals belonging to different taxonomic orders, which a cross between a pig and chimpanzee would be interordinal. Any firm opinion on such a point must therefore necessarily be prejudiced. In fact, there is substantial evidence on this website supporting the idea that very distantly related mammals can mate and produce a hybrid. He says, see this section on mammalian hybrids, and in particular, look at the videos shown there of ostensible rabbit and cat hybrids. Cabbits. Yeah, I mean, you can't call them rats, right? They got to be cabbits.
They could be crats.
What? I didn't hear what he said. Prats?
Don't know. Brats, bunnies, and cats.
Brats? Another relevant case involves ostensible hybridization between dog and cow. In addition, certain fishes belonging to different orders have been successfully crossed, and available information on mammalian hybrids indicates that various other extremely distant crosses have occurred. Evidence published in the journal Nature demonstrates that the platypus genome contains both bird and mammal chromosomes. Remember Tom, the platypus? Really? Explains a lot here. As Frank Gatzner, the lead author of the study, stated in a related news story, the platypus actually links the bird sex chromosome system with the mammalian sex chromosome systems. How could this be the case if a bird and a mammal did not at some time in the past hybridize to produce a fertile hybrid? Such a cross would be far more distant than one between a chimpanzee and a pig, and platypuses are, of course, fertile, otherwise they would not be able to propagate themselves. And seemingly a cross between a primate and a pig did occur in 2008.
Oh.
He's got data on all this on the website again. So he says another suggestive fact, probably known to the reader, is the frequent use of pigs in the surgical treatment of human beings. Pig heart valves are used to replace those of human coronary patients. Pig skin is used in the treatment of human burn victims. Serious efforts are now underway to transplant kidneys and other organs from pigs into human beings. Why are pigs suited for such purposes? Why not goats or dogs or bears? All animals that, in terms of taxonomic classification, are no more distantly related to human beings than pigs are. The general examination of the process of evolution as a whole, as presented elsewhere on this site, strongly suggests that most forms of life are of hybrid origin. So why should humans be any different? It might seem unlikely that a pig and a chimpanzee would choose to mate, but their behavior patterns and reproductive anatomy do in fact make them compatible, and this topic is considered in detail in later sections. But it is, of course, a well-established fact that animals sometimes attempt to mate with individuals that are unlike themselves, even in a natural setting, and that many of these crosses successfully produce hybrid offspring. One of my favorite... I used to collect fail memes, where it's just a picture and it says fail on it somewhere. One of my favorite ones is a little house mouse trying to bone an actual computer mouse. And it says fail, right? So yes. Accepted theory, which assumes that humans have been gradually shaped by natural selection for traits favorable to reproduction, does not begin to account for the relative infertility of human beings in comparison with non-human primates and other types of animals. How would natural selection ever produce abnormal, dysfunctional sperm? On the other hand, the idea that humans are descended from a hybrid cross, especially a relatively distant cross, provides a clear explanation for Homo sapiens' puzzling and persistent fertility problems. If we supposed standard theory to be correct, it would seem most peculiar that pigs and humans share features that distinguish human beings from chimpanzees, but that pigs and chimpanzees should not share these features. Conventional theory, which assumes that pigs are equally as far removed from humans as from chimpanzees, says that pigs and chimpanzees would share about as many such traits as would pigs and humans. And yet, I have never been able to identify any such traits despite assiduous investigation. The actual finding is that traits distinguishing chimpanzees from humans consistently link pigs with humans alone.
God, that's crazy.
It will be difficult to account in terms of natural selection for this fact. For each such feature, we will have to come up with a separate ad hoc argument explaining how the feature has helped both pigs and humans to survive and reproduce. On the other hand, a single, simple assumption that modern humans or earlier hominids that gave rise to modern humans arose from a cross between pig and chimpanzee. And this will account for all of these features at a single stroke.
Bam.
For my own part, curiosity has carried me away from my old idea of reality. I no longer know what to believe. This guy sounds like a snake bro. This is what happens. Is it possible that so many biologists might be wrong about the nature of human origins? Is it possible for a pig to hybridize with a chimpanzee? I have no way of knowing at present, but I have no logical or evidential basis for rejecting the idea. And before dismissing such a notion, I would want to be sure on some logical evidentiary basis that I actually should dismiss it. The ramifications of any misconception on this point seem immense. As Huxley put it long ago, the question of questions for mankind, the problem which underlies all others, and is more deeply interesting than any other, is the ascertainment of the place which man occupies in nature.
Yeah.
Are we simply another type of primate like the chimpanzee or the baboon? Or are we a complex melange, an alloy of two very distinct forms of life? These are questions that can only be resolved by examining the evidence. So I invite the reader to consider these two possibilities as simple hypotheses, to consider the data coldly, and then to determine which of the two is more consistent with available evidence.
Phone down.
So yeah, again, there's a lot more on his website in that vein if you're interested in the human. He goes into all kinds of data, which is not really suitable for reading out loud, but is definitely suitable for reading to yourself if you're just reading it off the screen. So I really encourage people to go check out that website it's been blowing my mind. So, but I buy it. Now, let's go make some BLTs.
All right. Man, that was awesome. Crazy.
Yep. Oh, yeah. And Watcher's pointing out we use pig insulin to synthesize insulin for human diabetics. So just another one of the ways in which we can somehow use pig stuff and not chimpanzee stuff to help humans.
Yeah, and you showed me that picture that he had on the website of the...
Yeah, so I want to put that in this. That'll probably be in the show notes, the eyes.
Yeah.
Because he has a comparison, and this was... Like, this really affected me when I saw the comparison.
There's so many morphological similarities, but they're non-visible.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
They're internal structures or things like that.
Right. But on the website, he has a picture. He's like, here's a chimpanzee eye. And then here's a human eye. And here's the pig eye. And you can clearly see that the pig eye, when he's got a little square picture, so that it's just, you just see the eye part. You're not looking at the rest of the face of the pig, which can kind of distract you. So you're basically just looking at the eye and the eye socket, the eyelashes, the eyelids, the eye itself, how much white there is, the kind of irises, everything. You just look at it and you see that pig eye and you look at the human eye and you're like, yes, those are the same things. And the chimpanzee eye looks nothing like them. So I'll put that in the show notes if I can. I'm going to steal it from his website and stick it in there. It was really, that one really affected me. I was just like, okay, I buy it. Holy crap. Pimpanzees.
That's
all right,
great.
folks. I hope you enjoyed that whole topic.
We did. It's been awesome.
You guys can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent at gmail.com. Check out the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. You can look at the Encyclopedia and the glossary. Check out the SnakeSkins. There's 3 different types of snakeskins in there now. One of them including the evolution shirt that was talked about in the emails earlier. Join the pyramid scheme. That is, help us out, get us straight to pyramids. You can use Patreon or PayPal to do that. The links are on the website. Give us reviews wherever you can, but especially in the Apple Podcasts, iTunes place, whatever it's called. Still don't know what it's actually called. The iTunes Podcast Store place, Apple thing. Share the shows wherever you can. Follow us on Twitter at Snake Bros with no vowels, SNKBRS. Join the Facebook group. Join the Discord. There's a link to it on the website. That's really where we're all congregating these days and hanging out and talking about snaky stuff and snickins. Check out the Library of the Serpent, which is run by Jeff. Has tons of books that you can download and papers and everything, all related to topics we have talked about here on the show. It's constantly being updated. Thanks to History Shift, who makes all of our YouTube videos. So if you're watching this on YouTube, this video is his work. So thanks to him very much. You can follow him on YouTube and on Twitter. And Pod Doodles, who takes some of our shows and turns them into doodles that you can watch him drawing while listening to the show. And don't forget about Cosmographia, the podcast we do with Randall Carlson. We do have a subreddit, so check that out. It's r/Brothers of the Serpent. And thanks to Where Did the Road Go, Uncharted X, Micah Maurice's Mind Escape, Grimerica, Conspiranormal, the 7 Ages Audio Journal, and Skeptico. And all of you listeners out there.
Yeah, thank you so much. We love you.
We always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Back to work.
Always love 'em.